Chapter 1402. Su Fengnian had originally planned to part ways with Yul Wandao and Yochi no Retreat Battalion at the northern border of Liangyu and then head to the Beiliang Protectorate where Chu Lushan was. However, there was an urgent report from a spy that Yan Wenluan was already on her way and wanted to meet him to discuss military matters. Therefore, Su Fengnian chose a location in the middle and had the commander-in-chief of Beiliang's army, who controlled more than 100,000 border troops, wait for him in Yanji County. When Yudilong heard that they were going to Yanji County, his previously depressed child finally smiled a little. Unfortunately, when he found out that Su Fengnian and Yan Wenluan had arranged to meet in the county capital and not in Bishan County where his master had been the registrar for a period of time, Yudilong fell silent again. He felt a sense of loss as if he had just crossed the threshold of his home but not entered it. Su Fengnian stayed in an elegant residence that had been meticulously arranged by Fu Shui Fong in the middle of the night. The group of people had just stepped over the threshold when they heard the sound of heavy rain hitting the roof and courtyard walls behind them. Su Fengnian did not feel sleepy. After arriving at the study with a large collection of books, he stood by the window and looked at the curtain of rain in the courtyard. Perhaps it was just as the ancient saying went, late at night is best for reminiscing about the past. For some reason, Su Fengnian remembered many of his frivolous actions when he was young. For example, he had stamped the word fake on the hundreds of authentic works of famous artists he had passed through, and he had spent a lot of money on foreign wanderers passing through Beiliang's territory. He still remembered a certain famous scholar from Jiangnan who had cursed Beiliang for being a shortcut to the officialdom for half of his life. Su Fengnian was indignant that the scholar had written many poems about riches and honor after occupying a high position. He had even sent someone to deliver a letter to the scholar. The general idea was that the scholar, who had been flattered and praised as a graceful and elegant plaything, should not be regarded as truly rich. If one was truly rich, they would not talk about fine wine, fine food, gold, and jade. What lazy pillow jade cool was all for the poor. In the end, Su Fengnian wrote a sentence on the letter, when the rain comes, I listen to the sound of banana leaves 1,000 times. When the rain comes, I sit and watch the lake. It was said that the old scholar was furious when he read the letter. He quickly wrote a letter of impeachment. First, he said that banana leaves were not resistant to the cold, and their branches and leaves would crack when exposed to the wind. It was not easy to find a single banana in the northwestern frontier fortress, but there were actually 1,000 trees on Mount Qingliang. Therefore, he concluded, it must be the king of Beiliang, Su Shao, who embezzled the army's funds and filled his own pockets. He completely ignored the important matters at the border and betrayed the emperor's grace. He should be stripped of his title. Of course, at that time, there were such righteous memorials in the Liang imperial court all year round. The late Emperor Zhao Dun did not pay any attention to them, but he did not restrict them. Su Fengnian clearly remembered that after he sent out the letter, it stirred up a heated discussion in the Gangnam-do literary circle. One side was scolding him, Su Shao, and Beiliang. His second sister, Su Weisheng, who had just gone to Shangyin Academy to study, wrote a letter saying that Su Fengnian's writing was rubbish. However, in the end, she personally wrote a letter to the famous scholar. After that, all the famous scholars in Jiangnan tucked their tails between their legs. However, Su Shao used some unknown means to obtain the letter. When he was drinking with his son in Wutong'an, he flattered him incessantly. He said that he had to consult with Li Shan for a long time before he understood the meaning of 1,000 banana leaves. After he was drunk, he repeated the same few sentences over and over again. He said that he was really happy that his son was better than his father. Look, he even knew how to compose poems. In the future, he would definitely be a more competent and convincing vassal king than him, Su Shao. Even though Su Fengnian's memory was far superior to that of ordinary people, he could not remember Su Zhao's words and expressions because of his sloppy and perfunctory attitude at the time. However, there was one action of Su Zhao's that he remembered more and more clearly even after so many years. Before Su Xiao left Wutongan in a drunken stupor, he picked up the letter from the Gongnamdu on the table and carefully put it away in his sleeve. At the time, Su Fengnian was somewhat puzzled. Su Xiao had walked step by step towards the glorious official position in his life. Even the imperial edicts for promotions and titles had always been piled up carelessly. Was it worth it for you to take a letter that was sent to scold someone so seriously? Chapter 1403. Su Fengnian stood by the window without sleeping all night. It seemed like in the blink of an eye, it was already a new morning. Last night, the rain had fallen intermittently 3 times. Even at dawn, his vision was still blurry. Su Fengnian raised his head. The last torrential rain had just stopped. The sky was still covered in dark clouds, but with the passage of time, the sunlight shone through the gaps in the dark clouds, illuminating the earth with pillar after pillar of light. From the courtyard next door came the muffled sounds of collisions. It was Yu Dilong and Lu Yunzhang, who had temporarily not followed the great snow dragon cavalry to Liangzhou's northern front, exchanging pointers. The 2 disciples didn't use weapons. In close combat, both sides' fists met flesh. Whoever couldn't take it and had to take 3 steps back first would lose. Not long after, the oldest, but only the youngest disciple, Lu Yunzhang, shouted that he was going to take that frost-covered long blade. Yu Dilong, who was probably the youngest, but was the eldest disciple, ignored him. The courtyard returned to silence. Su Fengnian felt a bit of regret. It wasn't that he was like a fan of martial arts and reluctant to leave, nor was it that he had sunk so deeply into the feeling of being unrivaled in the world. Rather, it was that if his cultivation was still at the peak, when he heard that Beimang imperial tutor had Hong Jingyan, Zhong Liang, and Murong Baoding as backup, his hands and feet would not have been tied. But then again, if he, Su Fengnian, was still fully deserving of the title of new martial emperor, Taiping Ling, Tuoba Chiyun, and the others would not have appeared. Su Fengnian reckoned that if he were to fight in close quarters, in terms of cultivation level, he, Su Fengnian, could still be considered a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. He was only slightly inferior to Tuoba Bodhisattva, Dong Tai, Chao Chongqing, Su Yanbing, Huyan Dagwan, and Chen Jibao. However, if it were a life-and-death situation, Su Fengnian would place someone whose reputation had plummeted into the top 3, Gu Jiantang. Su Fengnian walked out of the study and stood on the steps. A short and skinny armored old man strode into the courtyard alone. Su Fengnian did not deliberately assume a welcoming posture. He waited until the old man, whose armor still had traces of rain on it, walked up the steps. Su Fengnian walked with him to the study. There was already a pot of hot tea on the table, but there were no teacups. Instead, there were 2 large bowls. It was none other than Yan Wenluan. The one-eyed old man poured a bowl and drank it in one gulp. Then, Yan Wenluan placed her fists on her knees and looked at Su Fengnian, as if she was going to denounce him. Su Fengnian waited for her to continue. This old general was the biggest mountain in the Beiliang army. After the previous cavalry commander, Zhong Hongwu, fell, Yuan Zhuozong had just succeeded. Yan Wenluan, who had firmly held the power of the Beiliang infantry, could be said to be the biggest force. But many border soldiers and Beiliang people did not know a secret. The Beiliang army, or more accurately, the Su family army, was divided into 2 factions from the start. One faction was led by the gentle strategist, Li Shan. After the Battle of the Western Fortress, he advocated that Su Xiao immediately go north and return to the capital. The other faction was led by the more radical Zhao Chongling. They wanted to take half of the country in one go, and tried to divide and defend themselves. They wanted to share the world with the Zhao family in the north and south. In the end, they would fight a battle similar to the Battle of the Western Fortress to decide who the world belonged to. This potential split spread until Su Xiao was made a king and became a vassal. Su Fengnian's uncle, Wuxia, was disheartened at that time and chose to leave the army. There was also Su Pu, who later hid his name in Beimang's Dunhuang city. Many people under these two generals were also impulsive and left Su Zhao's side. It could be said that the victory of Li Yishan's faction was a Pyrrhic victory. In the eyes of many old people in the Beiliang army, this meant that Li Yishan had single-handedly created Su Zhao's home, Beiliang, Zhao world structure. It could not be said to be wrong, but it was very mediocre. More importantly, Zhao Chongling had died in his prime due to illness, causing this faction to lose its backbone. Adding on the many people Zhao Chongling had raised, the Beiliang army, led by Yan Wenwan, a famous general from the spring and autumn period, was unwilling and did not dare to interfere in the family matters of the Su family. Many years later, Chen Jibao rode alone to western Shu in a fit of pique. Yan Wenwan suddenly sighed and poured a cup of tea for himself. He thought and then poured tea for the bowl in front of Su Fengnian. The old man held up the large bowl and said emotionally, "All these years, I have always had a knot in my heart. I went to Clear Cold Mountain so many times, but purposely did not go to Tide Listening Pavilion to see Sir Li. The general tried to persuade me once, but gave me a lame excuse. After that, the general did not mention this matter." Su Fengnian didn't say some casual words. Instead, he went straight to the point and said, "My master never regretted his decision back then when he was alive. He always believed that if he wanted to fight for the world, Su Shao and the Su family's armored cavalry wouldn't have the momentum. Those who wanted to become a minister of the dragon were delusional. It's not that Su Fengnian does not respect Sir Zhao, and it's not that I'm just standing there and talking without feeling any pain or taking advantage of the situation. In Tide Listening Pavilion, my master, Chancellor Wang, and my second sister repeatedly deduced the situation back then. The conclusion was the same." Yan Wenluan's expression was complicated. He drank a mouthful of tea and shook the large white bowl. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Back then, at the crucial moment when the prince was about to succeed to the throne, Yan Wenluan was also guessing who to use to establish my might. After thinking it over and over again, there was one most likely and one least likely. The former was to make an eyesore like me obediently take off my armor and retire to the countryside. The least likely was to take down the Huaihua great general. Regardless of whether Zhong Hongwu's conduct is good or bad, in the eyes of the capital, he has always been an important character that the great general used to restrict me and Chen Jibao. Su Fengnian calmly said, "If it was still a peaceful and prosperous time, I would definitely choose Zhong Hongwu. I would not even hesitate to let him choose a trusted aide to become the protector general of Beiliang after he retired from the border army. I would also think of ways to make you, Yan Wenluan, unable to protect your integrity in your old age. I would slowly cut off your wings and remove Sir Zhao's Lufeng legacy. I would make Chen Jibao completely a loner with power but not great power. Chen Jibao's brand in the Beiliang army would naturally gradually fade." Yan Wenluan laughed coldly. "The prince is indeed Sir Li's proud disciple. You are indeed good at scheming and are most adept at schemes to destroy the enemy." Su Fengnian did not take it to heart. He raised his hand and laughed softly. "Cold words hurt, but fortunately there is still hot tea to warm the heart. Drink, drink, drink." The old general of Beiliang, who was known for his unyielding temperament, did not flip the table and shed all pretense of cordiality on the spot. Instead, he drank a mouthful of hot tea with a straight face. The atmosphere in the room was stiff. Su Fengnian was the first to break the silence, but it was a digression. "I heard that Nayland Yusi said that he wanted to join forces with Xia Feiyu to evaluate the new martial arts evaluation, Rouge evaluation, and general evaluation." Yan Wenluan said unhappily, "Those lousy things are just scholars looking for trouble when they have nothing better to do." Su Fengnian drank the tea and put down the teacup. With a solemn expression, he said in a deep voice, "Then today I will tell the old general about a serious matter that several scholars have done together." "Yes, 4 people." Yan Wenluan frowned. Su Fengnian said 4 names. They were Huang Longshi, Li Shan of Tide Listening Pavilion, Nailan Yisi of Nanjiang, Liang Emperor Xiuan Benshi. Yan Wenluan subconsciously sat up straight. Chapter 1404. Su Fengnian pushed away the teapot and teacup, drew a line on the table with 2 fingers, and said slowly, before the spring and autumn period, since the establishment of the Great Qin dynasty, every time the nomadic tribes in the north launched a raid, or the internal turmoil in the Central Plains, the scholars of the Central Plains all migrated to the south to avoid the disaster. In history, there were several large-scale river crossings, but the imperial family always went from the north to the south, only moving south and then moving south again. There has never been a northern crossing of the Guangling River. Among them, the Lu family in the last years of the Yongxi dynasty and the Ganlu southbound after the fall of Dafeng were the most typical examples. It can be said that the Chujiang of the 9 kingdoms of the spring and autumn was able to become the leader because the Ganlu southbound gave them the orthodox identity of the Central Plains. The opposite of the past, Hongjia fled north. Everyone knows that there were 2 routes, one of which was to migrate to the capital of the Liang Kingdom, Tai and City. After that, most of the people were from the Song, Wei and Sui dynasties, mixed with a small number of people from the West Chu and Southern Tang. Su Fengnian drew a slightly curved line on the table again. After that, about half a year later, an unprecedented exodus involving more nobles began. West Chu, who had the strongest character, Southern Tang, who loved debauchery and extravagance, and Western Shu, who had the most attachment to their homeland, all appeared in this flood. Dozens of people, big and small, finally converged at the current Liangyu River 3 prefectures and entered the Beimang Gusai and Longyao prefectures, resulting in the current southern dynasty of Beimang. Yan Wenluan nodded and said, "At that time, after Chu Lushan's thousands of cavalry entered Shu, we used infantry to defeat the Western Shu army. Gu Jiantang was lucky, but great ancestor Gu, who was the pillar of southern Tang, was unlucky. We took down southern Tang almost without bloodshed. The 8 emperors either hung themselves, burned themselves, or became prisoners. That's why the old emperor of Liang said, 'Finally, we can use the Zhao family's peace to bring peace to the world.' But what did this have to do with those 4 people? Rumor has it that Mr. Li and Nailan Yusi once traveled through the spring and autumn period together. Even if it is true, each of them served their own master, and they would absolutely not work together. Not to mention that our Belyang's men of sacrifice have tried many times to kill half of Benshi's tongue." Yan Wenluan sneered and said, "Your Highness, although I, Yan Wenluan, am a boorish person, I still know some things about the world outside of war. If you say that these 4 people sat at a table like us and plotted for Hongjia to escape to the north, I would really laugh my head off. That's not the way to brag about not needing a draft." Su Fengnian's expression was as usual. He shook his head and said, "Let's take 10,000 steps back and assume that the 4 of them, each with their own camp and each with their own plans, had gathered together to make a plan. How could the Beimang peace magistrate, who had been traveling in the Central Plains for more than 20 years, not have noticed any clues?" Yan Wenluan couldn't help but laugh angrily and said, "Then why did you say that, Your Highness?" Su Fengnian looked at the old general calmly. For the first time, the old general didn't glare back. He just smiled awkwardly and waved his hand. "Go on, I won't talk nonsense." Su Fengnian continued, "Huang Sanja, who used his 3-inch tongue to mess up the spring and autumn period, actually didn't do anything in this unprecedented change in 1,000 years. The reason why he was dragged into this was because without him, there wouldn't have been the unification of Liang, and Hongjia wouldn't have escaped to the north. If we talk about the spring and autumn period, Huang Longshi definitely can't be ignored. It will be the same in the history books in the future. Huang Sanja used his glib tongue to form alliances, while my father used his cavalry and Su Dao to sink the Shenzhou continent. Thus, a new problem appeared in front of some people. Although the Central Plains matter was settled, there was still a neighbor in the north who was eyeing covetously. This evil neighbor from the north who would occasionally come to the southern neighbor's house to steal things was even more vulgar and barbaric than the uncivilized Liang in the eyes of the West Chu scholars. Since Liang was able to conquer the Central Plains, then wouldn't it be possible for Bei Mang, who revered military force, to take a step further and swallow up Liang? Yan Wenluan was stunned and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. He was only a martial artist who led troops into battle. He really hadn't considered this difficult problem. When the great general was alive, almost all of the Beiliang people, including Yan Wenluan, had a strong sense of self-confidence. That was, with the 300,000 Beiliang border troops, the Bei Mang barbarians could forget about taking a single step south into the Central Plains. What reason did this need? No need. After the great general passed away, it was not long before the million-strong army of the northern barbarians came knocking on the border. Yan Wenluan didn't have much time to think about it. As for Hong Jia running north, who would care about such an old matter? Su Fingnian paused for a long time, as if he was thinking about how to phrase it. When Yan Wenluan looked over with an inquisitive expression, he said, "My master was never willing to mention Nailan Yusi, who was also a strategist. But it's true that he was an old acquaintance with this person. My master didn't tell me about this plan when he was still alive. I discovered it myself from clues." Chen Shiliang was on the top floor of the Tide Listening Pavilion looking through his handwritten notes. At the end of last year, he sent a secret letter to Mount Qingliang, which confirmed my guess. I can conclude that my master must have thought of setting up this big plan at the beginning. The initial idea probably occurred at the end of the Battle of the Western Fortress. Conquering West Chu was equivalent to cleaning up the mess that Huang Sanja had created. I guess that when he accompanied Su Shao north to the capital, he might have met Nailan Yusi, who was traveling north with Zhao Bing, the Prince of Yanqi. It's also possible that the two of them didn't meet at all, but they had a very secretive exchange of letters. Old General Mu should have more or less known about what happened later. Su Shao, who had lost soldiers and generals in West Chu, had just become the king of Beiliang in the imperial court when he announced that he would wash the Guangling River with blood before conquering the northwest. He wanted the corpses of West Chu's scholars to block the mouth of the river. Not long after, Zhao Bing also became the Prince of Yanqi, who had the widest territory. Moreover, very soon, there was the shocking tragedy of the remnants of the southern Tang's army killing the 3,000 soldiers left behind in Liang. The grievous news was urgently transmitted to the capital from 800 li away. At that time, Zhao Bing's mood must have been very bad, because according to his military achievements, he should have been bestowed with the richest Guangling road in the world. There was simply no place for Zhao Yi. As a result, the southern border gave him a show of strength, which was tantamount to pouring oil on the fire. Among the vassals, Zhao Bing, who was the most bloodthirsty, should have been furious. According to common sense, there was a rumor in the unofficial history that Zhao Bing chopped down a cypress tree with a saber, swearing to kill all the young men of the southern Tang. Yan Wenluan made a sound of agreement. This matter is indeed true. At the time, the great general even told us about it as a joke. The old man suddenly made a sound of surprise. But if I remember correctly, at that time, when the old emperor was rewarding meritorious officials, the great general squeezed out Gu Jiantang to become the king of Beiliang. No one dared to say anything. Gu Jiantang could only be the minister of war who stayed in the capital. He could only fiddle with that tattered Gu hut under the noses of the two emperors. What was the saying? Su Fingnian smiled and said, "Chatting with the emperor." Yan Wenluan smiled and nodded. "Yes." Then Yan Wenluan returned to the topic and said, "But at first, the imperial court intended to let Zhao Bing be the king of Huainan. Not to mention the distant southern border where the emperor was, even the king of Jing'an could not be. He could only be the king of Huainan, helping the Zhao family in Liang to keep an eye on the great general. Zhao Bing was certainly not happy, so he asked to go to the Tu Liao to be the king of Jiaodong. The great general later told us that Xiao Bing had a private chat with the old emperor. He said that he was not willing to eat the dust behind the great general and wanted to go to the Tuliao to fight the Beimang barbarians. He said that even if Xiao Bing were to die, he would die on the back of a horse. But the result was unexpected. Xiao Bing became the king of Yan. Although he was not as good as Xiao Duan's brother, Xiao Yi, he was still much better than the king of Huainan, Xiao Ying, who had been oppressed for most of his life. Yan Wenluan patted her knee heavily and said in a deep voice, "In this way, it makes sense. If you want to drive away the remnants of the spring and autumn period and force them to cross the Guangling River, you have to force Shu, Chu, and Tang, who should be the most unwilling to leave their homeland. Especially those aristocratic families with 100 years of country, 1,000 years of family, they will not be willing to be homeless dogs after the fall of their country. Your Highness, in this, it was Yuan Benshi, the fourth counselor who later became the teacher of the Emperor of Liang, who contributed and did something, right? What, did Mr. Li really have an unknown relationship with this person?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "No. Yuan Benshi was just plotting for the Zhao family." Yan Wenluan imperceptibly turned into a child who was seeking advice from a teacher. She asked curiously, "Your Highness, what do you mean?" However, Su Fengnian was distracted. Yan Wenluan was somewhat helpless. The old man did not have the face to ask again. Moreover, even if Su Fengnian did not say anything, she, Yan Wenluan, could not think for herself. Then, the old man seriously pondered for a moment and suddenly said loudly, "After rushing for so long, just drinking tea is boring. It's not enough. Your Highness, would you like some wine?" Su Fengnian smiled and got up to get the wine. When he returned to the study with 2 pots of green ant wine, Yan Wenluan could not wait to open a pot and drank 3 mouthfuls in succession before stopping. She wiped her mouth and said with a smile, "Your Highness said that Yuan Benshi was plotting for the Emperor of Zhao family. Does it mean that Yuan Benshi was not at ease with those deep-rooted maggots in the 8 kingdoms? Since he did not like them, he was afraid that they would cause trouble and delay Zhao Duan from launching the war against Beimang after he ascended the throne. He was worried that these remnants would stab him in the back, so he simply drove them out. This is the same logic as the scholars of Liang having to be officials in foreign lands." Yan Wenluan, who had finally thought of this step, began to doubt herself very quickly. She had no choice but to ask again, but Yuan Benshi was willing to let so many so-called noble clans go to Beimang in one go. Chapter 1405. At this point, Yan Wenluan suddenly woke up. His eyes suddenly became cold, and his tone also became somewhat indifferent. He stared fixedly at Su Fengnian. Since the first year of Yonghui, Liang has issued a heavy law. 10 caddies of ironware, 1 craftsman. Once someone enters Beimang, the local officials must migrate for 3,000 li. For so many years, many people on the borders took risks out of desperation, and because of this, they became rich. Afterwards, there were few investigations. But in our northern Liang, in the past 20 years, under Mr. Li's orders, we have killed more than 10 surplus generals and lieutenants with real power. Yan Wenluan clenched the big white bowl on the edge of the table that was filled with hot tea and strong wine. He narrowed his eyes and said gloomily, "Since Wuxia told me about this Beimang fleeing to the north, naturally there must be a deep meaning. Even if you beat me to death, I don't believe that Mr. Li and that Naylan Yusi wanted to greatly increase Beimang's strength. That's why Beimang gained the southern dynasty for no reason, as well as the nearly 1 million Chuanqiu adherents who constantly talk about the Central Plains as the new era. But if Wuxia can't give me an explanation today, then I will boldly demand an explanation from Wuxia on behalf of the dead soldiers of Crouching Bao and Luanhe cities, as well as all the Beiliang frontier army soldiers who died in battle." Su Fengnian wasn't in a hurry to explain anything. Instead, he dipped his finger in the wine and bent over to point at the north and south ends of the table. "To accomplish this, we must first form a situation where we close the door and beat the dog. Zhao Bing, who threatened to kill all the young and strong men of southern Tang, is doing the dirty work of raiding the base. In fact, he did kill tens of thousands of southern Tang surrendered soldiers as soon as he arrived at Nanjiang. Among these people, only a few thousand truly had the intention to rebel. Most of the others died unjustly. Someone has done the raiding, but someone has to close the door. Su Xiao is doing this. It's just that back then, he led the army to Nanjiang and moved exceptionally slowly. Yuan Benshi, who felt that he was tricked by my master and Nailan Yusi, was trying to mend the pen after the sheep is lost. Like you, Yuan Benshi hoped that those influential families would die under the tree, so that they wouldn't affect his primary task of assisting Zhao Dun in the war against Beimang. However, Yuan Benshi also didn't want Su Xiao to rush north in the latter half of the year and actually go straight to his archenemy Beimang. His original intention was for Su Xiao's army to speed up and block the northwest gate before that, so that this flock of cattle and sheep to be slaughtered could be driven back to the capital region and stay with the flood of northern Tang's army. Therefore, the imperial court ordered Gu Jintang's trusted general, Kai Nan, to rush west. However, at that time, neither Su Xiao nor the Ji province's Han family stopped him for their own reasons. As a result, Kai Nan, who didn't have many cavalry troops at that time, didn't succeed. After that, Li Yang didn't dare to do anything to Su Xiao, but you, the Han family, can't take care of him. Therefore, the imperial court quickly executed the entire Han family. Back then, a fish escaped the net and became a loyal martyr. It was just a matter of an imperial edict. Back then, Zhang Julu presided over this matter because he truly wanted to exterminate the Han family. However, to say that he was influenced by his master and killed people out of personal grudges is to underestimate him. After Su Fengnian raised the wine pot, he didn't drink. The reason why Yuan Benshi didn't pursue this matter is very simple. After several major battles, Li Yang lost one battle after another, and the Zhao family's elite suffered heavy losses. Then, he suddenly discovered that Beimang was busy digesting the southern court and wanted to finish it off in one fell swoop in a few years. This allowed the Liang imperial court, which was under Zhao Dun's rule, to take a breather and work hard bit by bit. In addition, Yuan Benshi didn't think that in the future, Li Yang would lose to Beimang in a competition of national strength. Hong Jia's northward journey gradually became a rotten debt that no one cared about. The Liang imperial court didn't dare to make a sound because this was the only reverse scale that Zhao Dun, who was known for his open-mindedness and magnanimity, couldn't touch. Yan Wenwan, who was about to throw her bowl and fall out with him, frowned and asked, "So you're saying that the northward journey was a burden to Beimang?" Yan Wenwan quickly shook her head and said, "No." Although the remnants of the spring and autumn period did weaken Beimang's martial spirit to a certain extent, to that old woman, accepting these people had far more advantages than disadvantages. Now that they were attacking Gourd Mouth in Yuzhou and Huda City in Liangzhou, this point was already proven. Their method of attacking cities was no different from that of the Central Plains. Taking Gourd Mouth as an example, that vanguard general Zhong Tan even had the leisure to train his troops when he attacked Crouching Bao City and Luanhe City. On the surface, he only attacked one side of the city with the Crouching Bao City. On the surface, it looked no different from children playing house. But soon, when he attacked Luanhe City, he began to try to encircle 3 and block 1. Even after he broke through the city, he was so cruel to both the enemy and himself that he intentionally fought in the alleys to enter the city. Now that they were attacking Xiaoguang City, the Beimang infantrymen were becoming more and more skilled, and the number of casualties on the local battlefield had sharply decreased. They were already so careful in attacking Beiliang. In the future, if Beimang really had the opportunity to attack those cities in the Central Plains, who else could defend those cities other than Western Shu and the 2 Liao provinces? The army of King Xiaobing of Yan. If the northern barbarians attacked all the way to Nanjiang, would there still be any meaning? Even if we don't talk about the battlefield, that Taiping order had already prepared a plan for how to quickly fill in a large number of skilled civil officials after Beiliang was taken. This would stabilize the rear defense and allow Beimang's cavalry to advance south without any worries. If this were 20 years ago, even if Beimang dared to think about it, it would never have been able to do it. Su Fingnian smiled and asked, "Old General, have you ever wondered why Su Xiao and Li Yishan didn't oppose me going to Beimang at all, and instead supported me?" Yan Wenluan's expression was still gloomy, but there was no longer any trace of the murderous intent from before. She gently shook her head. Su Fingnian looked out the window at the sky that was beginning to brighten. He slowly put down the wine pot and said softly, "Old General, wait patiently. Back then, when I went to Beimang alone, it was only to pass on a message to some people. It was very risky, wasn't it? But if I didn't take such a risk, how could I make others willingly take an even greater risk? As for who in Beimang didn't forget their original intentions back then, I don't know, but there are definitely many of them. If I didn't know, that old woman in Beimang and the Taiping order wouldn't be able to guess." Yan Wenluan was dumbstruck. Su Fingnian stood up and lowered his head to look at the table where the wine stains had long since disappeared. "Perhaps you'll ask, can those scholars be trusted?" Su Fingnian laughed to himself. "A few years ago, whoever dared to nod their head, I just took it as a joke. But of all the scholars in the world, just in the spring and autumn period that we've all experienced, there was Wang Mingyang who defended Xiangfan City to the death for 10 years, and Zhang Julu who brought about his own destruction." Yan Wenluan exhaled and said bitterly, "There was Wei Jingtang in Jizhou." In reality, in the spring and autumn period, there were quite a few scholars who were willing to die. Of course, I, Yan Wenluan, killed quite a few with my own hands. Su Fingnian walked to the window. Huang Sanjia once said that in this world, there will definitely be more and more people who can read and write. The general trend is also unstoppable. The hearts of the people are no longer what they used to be, and public morals are deteriorating day by day. But just because you've read and know how to read, you can't become a scholar, like Huang Sanjia said. Su Fingnian stretched out his hand and slowly clenched it into a fist. The more you know, the more you hold, the less you revere. This is human nature. A few years ago, His Royal Highness who didn't practice the saber again dared to be disrespectful to the Celestials. The mind is restless, the mind is restless. Taoism has the warning of the mind is restless, the mind is restless. Buddhism also has the saying, control the mind is restless. But the specific methods are too vague and vague. Reading and writing have always been a luxury for the common people, and they can't do it. Confucianism is very simple and clear. One word, propriety. Propriety is a framework, but it's actually more like a cage. The common people don't understand, but it doesn't matter. We set down very detailed rules, and you just have to follow. I think that one of the important reasons why Confucianism was able to stand out among the 100 schools of thought and eventually suppress the other schools is because of this. Of course, everyone likes to be free and unrestrained. Freedom is their nature. Under this kind of almost irreconcilable conflict, Confucianism and Moism had a huge disagreement. The Confucian sage had long since proposed that human nature is good. Later generations of sages constantly used various methods to subtly influence people. For example, when a child picked up a book, he had to memorize it, or else he would be beaten 300 times. In the end, this was the result of education. But what's interesting is that the Taoist sage came out to interrupt. He said that the sage abandoned wisdom, and the common people benefited 100 times. Abandon benevolence, and the common people returned to filial piety. Who is right and who is wrong? Perhaps there is no right or wrong. Huang Sanjia destroyed the spring and autumn period. What he did was only to give the people of the world an opportunity to have a choice called freedom earlier. And Zhang Julu, a scholar who had been a tailor for Li Yang for a full 20 years, used his own death to sow a framework in advance for this freedom of the later generations that he had behind the back of the Zhao family. Perhaps Zhang Julu's efforts were futile and meaningless, but since he could think of it and do it, then he would do it. This is Zhang Julu. I, Su Fengnian, can't do it. You, Yan Wenluan, can't do it. Those famous ministers of Spring of Eternal Hui can't do it. Even Tantanan and Qi Yonglong can't do it. In fact, other than him, no one can do it. Perhaps Wang Sanjia, who had no other choice but to scourge the people of the world with his 3-inch tongue, didn't say to us, "Know me, sin me." Only the spring and autumn period. The former Grand Secretary Zhang Julu, who didn't have a single will or last words, should have smiled and left behind a sentence for the later generations who treated him like a fool: "You are not a fish. How can you know the bitterness and happiness of a fish?" Yan Wenluan carried a wine pot and stood beside Su Fengnian. This was his first time listening to Su Fengnian's long-winded speech. When this young man was killing people in Lingzhou and Yuzhou, he wasn't this long-winded. But Yan Wenluan wasn't annoyed at all. Yan Wenluan put one hand behind his back and poured wine into his mouth with the other. After drinking it all, he shook the wine pot and asked, "Then what about Mr. Li?" When Yan Wenluan turned his head, he saw the young man smile and point his finger to the north. Su Fengnian's face had a charm that a crude martial artist like Yan Wenluan was destined not to have. Chapter 1406. Don't people say that my master is vicious and merciless, and that he likes to exterminate people? Hong Jia went north because he exterminated the potential scholars in the Central Plains, and then he went to Beiliang. Those 100,000 refugees were just a small part of his plan. Next, it's probably Beiliang. Yan Wenluan sighed, then laughed heartily. "Your Highness, the knot in my heart is gone. It's funny. When I first came to Yanji County, I wanted to be thick-skinned and flatter you. You and Yul Wandao fought beautifully in those battles outside the gourd. The establishment of no retreat camp boosted the morale of the entire Yuzhou. I didn't expect things to change. Just now, I almost wanted to flip the table and beat you up. Of course, the end result would be me being casually beaten up by you. Although your Highness didn't make it clear, I, Yan Wenluan, believe in the great general and Sir Li. After confirming this, I also understand why Sir Li didn't look favorably on Chen Jibao from the beginning. With Hong Jia going north and leaving Beiliang to him, after the battle with Beiliang, there will definitely be another unjust war in the eyes of scholars in the future. Su Fengnian didn't say anything. He looked somewhat tired. Yan Wenluan hesitated, but still said, "Your Highness, there's something I can't say. It's uncomfortable to keep it in my stomach." Although Chen Jibao left Beiliang, I, Yan Wenluan, can guarantee that after staying in Beiliang for so many years, he has never rebelled. He's definitely dissatisfied with you, but he definitely doesn't have any malicious intent to kill. I believe that he's just waiting. If after the great general leaves, Su Fengnian can't support Beiliang, then he'll come out and let Beiliang take the surname Qin. As for what the world will take in the end, whether it's Murong, Zhao, or Qin, it'll depend on Chen Jibao's ability. Su Fengnian smiled. I know. Yan Wenluan asked softly, "Really?" Su Fengnian turned his head. "Then I don't know." Yan Wenluan laughed heartily. "Looks like you really do know." It's Yan Wenluan who gauged the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure. Su Fengnian laughed along with him. "Isn't it just scolding people?" Yan Wenluan was startled at first, but after thinking for a while, the smile in her single eye became even brighter. However, she deliberately said helplessly, "The eloquence of a scholar is indeed impressive. I have no choice but to be impressed." In the end, the commander of Beiliang's infantry rushed over and cupped his fists. "Your Highness, let's go. Like what we said when we met in Yuzhou province, if there's a chance, even if I, Yan Wenwan, am lying in a coffin, I will also be carried to the palace of Beimang. Without waiting for Su Fengnian to say anything, the old man turned and strode away. When he passed by the table, he stopped and shouted, "Catch it." He picked up the wine pot and threw it to Su Fengnian. "Just treat it as this general treating Wang Ye to a drink." Su Fengnian raised his hand to catch the wine pot. Looking at the figure that had already crossed the threshold, he was astonished and muttered to himself, "There's actually a guest who uses the host's wine to treat others to a meal." Yan Wenluan strode down the corridor. At that time, the old man had wanted to say, "I believe in you, Su Fengnian," after, "I believe in the great general, I believe in Mr. Li," but at that time, he held himself back. Now, he was muttering to himself, "Great general, fighting a war like this is interesting. Just like when I followed the Grand General in the past, I'm not afraid of anything but death." Su Fengnian, who hadn't drunk a single drop of wine from beginning to end, sat back in his seat with a somewhat solemn expression. That cultured and refined fourth prince, Zhao Zhuan, wasn't someone to be trifled with after becoming the emperor. If Zhang Julu's death was ordered by his father, Zhao Zhuan, then Yuan Benqi's silent death was completely caused by Zhao Zhuan's cold-blooded methods. However, Su Fengnian wasn't surprised by this. Which of the three emperors of the Zhao clan wasn't an expert in cooking the hound after the rabbit had been caught? The reason why this prince of Liang, who had just ascended to the dragon throne, secretly opened the door to Ji City was not because he had nothing better to do than to give the two generals of Beimang some military exploits. It was because after Liang and Beiliang both changed their heirs, Su Fengnian was the first to go against the imperial edict and took the initiative to express the bottom line of the Beiliang. After Zhao Zhuan ascended to the throne, he quickly returned the favor by using the incident where Yu Province's 10,000 cavalrymen invaded Ji City, telling Su Fengnian that the bottom line of the Liang imperial court was not low either. Meanwhile, after Yuan Tingshan lost Silver Sparrow City, he atoned for his crime with military exploits. Like his father, Zhao Zhuan, who paid close attention to the military affairs of Ji City, Su Fengnian had just received intelligence that apart from the Ji City cavalry, the man who had transformed from Mad Dog Yuan to General Yuan also brought along more than 7,000 elite cavalrymen that were given to him by one of his two fathers-in-law, the head of the Yanbao clan. They waited patiently for the opportunity to strike, and defeated the 8,000 cavalrymen of Beimang, Great Ru Shiwei and Wang Jingchong. The report of victory that was delivered to Tai and City stated, "We lost less than 3,000 men, but we beheaded more than 10,000 enemies." Naturally, Su Fengnian knew very well that the 2,000 cavalrymen of Yanbao Li family that had been accumulated by generations of Yanbao Li family was definitely not included in the 3,000 casualties. However, after this battle, Zhao Zhuan, who had just ascended to the throne, would surely be pleased. The Ministry of War in the capital city, which was already badly battered by Guangling Dao, would also be happy. The morale of the two Liao soldiers on the Eastern Front would also be boosted. In fact, if it weren't for Su Fengnian being the biggest target in the world, even if Yuan Tingshan had achieved several times more military exploits, he would only attract mockery and suspicion. Su Fengnian sneered, "Compared to me, who is widely acknowledged to be the Beiliang son of His Royal Highness, you, Yuan Tingshan, have quite a good life." What truly gave Su Fengnian a headache wasn't Yuan Tingshan and Jizhou, but two other matters. In reality, Zhao Zhuan had done many things after the beginning of spring. For example, the relocation of the Hanlin Academy and the suggestion of a small minister from the Ministry of Revenue to rewrite the world's records into the small court he and the central government officials had established. Compared to the former, Beiliang's situation was completely different. The people of Beiliang had temporarily stabilized. Those who should leave and those who could leave had already left. They were mainly concentrated in the Beiliang circuit in Lingzhou, so there wasn't much of an impact. If the records were changed at this time, it would be the same as opening a big hole. Even though Beiliang's military households were the majority, it involved the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. If they could leave, who would be willing to wait for death within Beiliang's borders? Su Fengnian closed his eyes. The Minister of Revenue, Yuan Gua, who was the most talkative on this matter, kept his mouth shut. His silence was already a very clear stance. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy for him to make a comeback. He'd only been an earthly court disciple for a few days before he'd probably be banished to the cold palace again. The head of the secretariat, Qi Yanglong, supported it. Tantanan, the minister of the gate, opposed it. Yin Mao Chen, the heavenly official, supported it. However, he said that this matter should be slowed down rather than rushed. TSK, this wording was really meticulous. Not rushed, easy but not suitable. It was really exquisite. The second head of the secretariat, Xiao Yuling, really did sing the opposite of Yin Mao Chen. As expected of someone who didn't have any future in the same year as the imperial examination. He became an ally, and the promising became a political enemy. If this wasn't an urgent matter, then there was a small matter that was hidden among all the other important matters. It was the real unexpected surprise and urgent matter for the entire Beiliang circuit. The unexpected surprise was another hidden move of Zhang Julu's after his disciple, Wei Jingtang. If it weren't for the cheating case of the Liang transport that was deliberately downplayed by the imperial court, Su Fengnian wouldn't have been able to follow the vine to the melon and figure out Zhang Julu's intentions. It turned out that for all these years, Zhang Julu and Tantanan had been keeping an eye on the transport, especially on the matter of the cooling grain. They seemed to be creating difficulties in every possible way, but they actually secretly had people privately store grain. The granaries in the gray area were all along the Guangling River, further northwest of Xiangfan City. Su Fengnian dared to say that Zhang Julu was waiting. He was waiting for Beiliang to really be willing to fight to the death with the Beimang army, then these grain that originally belonged to Beiliang would be smoothly delivered into Beiliang's territory. If Beiliang was hiding its strength, Su Xiao and Su Fengnian had the intention to preserve their strength and set up a separatist regime. In that case, these grain provisions would be impossible to obtain. Zhang Julu had once decided to reform the transport, the Su officials, and the Guangling floods. In the end, they all died without a result. It might have been because of this kind of selfish motives that he had to cut them off. How difficult and complicated it was to govern a country. Just the matter of secretly storing grain involved a series of cumbersome appointments for the officials in charge of the transport of grain. It also involved the relatives of the emperor who lay on the lifeline of the country and the merit of the founding of the country. In the game of interests with these vermin and rats, Zhang Julu not only had to ensure that the blood of the country flowed without hindrance, but he also had to ensure that after Beiliang really did fight to the death with Beimang, the court or his current Grand Secretary Zhang Julu could also show some sincerity. More importantly, he had to maintain a balance between the emperor and the nobles. Now, Zhao Zhuan had personally turned this unexpected surprise into an urgent matter. The transport officials that Zhang Julu had arranged for were all wiped out. Their official ranks were not high, and the nobles did not care about these unimportant officials who were not their lackeys. Perhaps without these people, they would gain even more in the future. Furthermore, the emperor's iron fist and determination to deal with corruption received praise from the court. After this turmoil, who would dare to go against the imperial court? In the future, it would only be more difficult for Beiliang to obtain grain. Su Fengnian bent his fingers and knocked on the table again and again. Chapter 1407. With less than 2 million households in Beiliang, there were less than 10 million people, but they had to feed an entire 300,000 border soldiers. If it wasn't for the support of Lingzhou, known as the Northwestern Little Guangling, Beiliang, which had been stretched for more than 20 years, would have snapped a long time ago, let alone shoot arrows. How was Li Gongda able to become the head of the civil officials, Beiliang's administrator? Was it because he only knew how to sing praises to Su Xiao and only knew how to curry favor with him? Of course not. There was no other reason. Li Gongda knew how to make money. He was able to buy grain through all kinds of shady channels, and the prices were not high. The big shots who accepted the boxes of silver as bribes were, of course, the relatives of the imperial family and the descendants of meritorious deeds. The imperial court was losing a lot of money, and they only earned a small amount, of less than 1,000,000 taels a year. Their ancestors and fathers had all sacrificed their lives for Beiliang to unify the spring and autumn period and made great contributions. What did they have to feel guilty about earning some silver? In the short term, these people should not have the guts to get into trouble. Li Gongda, who was still the administrator, ran to Mount Qingliang and complained to the deputy administrator, Song Dongming. Official Li, who had always maintained himself well, would soon have his hair covered in white. Under this kind of grim situation, Provincial Governor Su Beiji, who had been hoarding grain like crazy in Lingzhou last year, quickly built and filled more than half of the granaries in his hands. At the time, he was ridiculed as the granary provincial governor who only knew how to buy rice. In one fell swoop, he became the entire Beiliang border army's savior. If it wasn't for Su Beiji, Su Fengnian would also pay attention to the granaries, but it was impossible for him to be as bold and decisive as Su Beiji to use the power of an entire province to hoard grain. Su Beiji was in charge of buying grain in Lingzhou, and it could be said that he was unscrupulous. Not only did he use the connections that Li Gongda had accumulated over the years to buy grain outside of Beiliang at a high price, he also forcefully bought rice from the local tyrants and aristocrats in Lingzhou at a low price. If the people who had surplus grain wanted to sell it to earn the difference, Su Beiji would buy it all. Therefore, if it weren't for Su Beiji's granaries, Su Fengnian wouldn't have openly gone to Beiliang to steal grain from his distant relatives and neighbors. He wouldn't have been kind enough to let people lead troops out of the border to borrow grain. At the very least, he would have given some real money. However, this was not a long-term plan after all. Before long, the entire upper reaches of Guangling River would be cleared of Beiliang. Su Fengnian opened his eyes and muttered, "In the beginning, it was you, Chen Shiliang, who lost the salt, iron, and grain, and was banished to the land of refugees." Su Beiji first became the provincial governor of a province. Then, it was you who contributed greatly in defending Liuzhou, smoothly allowing Beiliang to have more than 100,000 young and strong soldiers. Then, it was Su Beiji who became the provincial governor of the granary. Soon after, it was Su Beiji who proved that he was right. Everyone else in Beiliang who was just watching the play was wrong. I firmly believe that you will definitely make the people of the world sit up and take notice of you. It has been like this from the very beginning. Su Fengnian looked around and stood up to fetch the 2 chest jars that the spies from the Fu Shui chamber had specially prepared. The red datewood wasn't rare, but the 2 boxes' texture respectively displayed the uncanny workmanship of the heavenly maiden scattering flowers, and the boy bowing. This made the 2 red datewood boxes, which were originally worth a few taels of silver, become priceless treasures used by West Chu's imperial court. They had been distributed to the common people after the fall of West Chu. Then, when Hong Jia was on his way to the north, it had wandered into the cold land and did not follow its owner into Beimang. Su Fengnian opened the 2 chest jars. The white chess pieces were the 180 famous snow prints. There were more than 20 intricate patterns on the chess pieces. The black chess pieces were the dark green fish brain jelly with a clear luster. Su Fengnian sat upright and still. He picked up a black and white chess piece and knocked it on the table that didn't have a chessboard. Then, as if he was about to start a game with someone, he placed the white chess jars across from him and softly said, "Master, Su Beiji and Chen Shiliang didn't disappoint you." Su Fengnian looked at the table that seemed even more empty with the addition of the 2 chess pieces. He was in a daze. Finally, he raised his head and looked at the empty table across from him. He didn't say anything. The sky outside the window was blue and white, and the room was no longer dark. The dark clouds had dispersed and threads of light shone in, clearly illuminating the dust that was usually invisible to the naked eye. In this room where there was only Su Fengnian, the chess pieces flew as if they were flying. As the pieces were placed, starting with the 3 words, Su Fengnian, one name after another came out of his mouth. There were names from Bai Liang, Bai Meng, and Li Yang. There were dead people, and living people. Some were famous, some were rising, and some were nameless. When he mentioned Lu Su, Su Fengnian paused and said, under Qi Yanglong's suggestion, Zhao Zhuan opened the 6 academies and added 6 more academicians after the 6 academicians in the palace hall. After making an exception for the old master of the Han family, he took advantage of the momentum to open the way for martial artists to use the word Wu as their title. This was to appease the civil officials, and at the same time to divide the power of the 6 ministries. During this time, it was said that the son of the Zhao family intended to discuss the king of Jing and you assisted, Zhao Sun. He summoned you to the capital to enter one of the 6 academies, the Hongwen Academy. Do you want to go? Will Zhao Sun be willing to let you go? Even if Zhao Sun can continue to bear the humiliation and have no choice but to let you leave Xiangfan City in Qingzhou alive, what price will you have to pay? Su Fengnian suddenly smiled and said, since it's difficult for you, and even more difficult for Zhao Sun, then I'll be a good person. Su Fengnian didn't turn his head, but he raised his voice and said, Mi Fengjie, Fan Shaochai, the 2 of you go to Xiangfan City and invite Lu Su to Beiliang. If he doesn't want to, then take him. Su Fengnian quickly sighed and said self-deprecatingly, forget it. If Lu Su really doesn't want to come to Beiliang, then send him to a place where he won't have to worry about Zhao Go. Su Fengnian looked across the table and said in a low voice, I'm really bad at gambling, and I'm soft-hearted. Fortunately, after so many years, Su Xiao has often been lectured by you like this. I've seen it with my own eyes more than once or twice. Lowering his head, he saw that there weren't many chess pieces left in the chess jar. The table had also become densely packed with black and white chess pieces. It reminded him of the battle between the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry and the Ruan Cavalry outside the mouth of the gourd. Su Fengnian finally began to drink. Before he started practicing martial arts, he had a good tolerance for alcohol, but now he was drunk. He slumped against the back of the chair, his entire body curled up in the chair as he fell asleep. In his dreams, he repeatedly murmured, they're all gone, they're all gone. Emperor Zhao Zhuan clearly intended to follow in the tradition of the previous emperor's diligence. However, compared to the previous emperor's all-nighters, Zhao Zhuan was clearly more restrained. He even practiced a set of martial arts every morning without fail. It was taught to him by the great Jinren of Mount Qingqing, who together with the residents of the Taoist master of Mount Longhu, who controlled the world's Taoism. If the young emperor was said to have listened more than he spoke in that small court meeting where the entire hall was filled with purple, he rarely made any decisive decisions. Now, he was slowly beginning to possess the bearing of an emperor. Other than Qi Yanglong, Huan Wen, and a few other old people, even Zhao Yuling, who had been in charge of the Minister of Personnel for many years, was clearly beginning to feel nervous. The re-examination of the world's editions, the deliberation of the candidates for the 6 academies, the promotion and demotion of former subordinates of the Ministry of Personnel, one after another, forced Zhao Yuling to brace himself to deal with it. This made Song Tonglu feel relieved. The Liang dynasty could not afford any turbulence at this time. If there were any signs of bullying in the center of the imperial court during the sensitive time when Liang and Liang were fighting on 2 fronts, even if Song Tonglu knew that he would be labeled as a eunuch interfering in politics, he would still blow a cold wind at some people who were qualified to participate in the small court meeting. Perhaps the heavens really did bless Liang. In the beginning, the Guangling Taoist army did not achieve victory. 2 old generals who were placed high hopes on by the imperial court, one died in battle and the other was caught like a turtle in a jar and became a laughingstock. Both of them lost to young people who were almost old enough to be their grandchildren. Fortunately, the Guangling Prince Xiao Yi's trusted general named Song Li was not only a blessing general for the emperor's uncle, but also a blessing general for the entire Liang. He quickly recovered all the lost land on the eastern front of Guangling, making those remnants of West Chu, who dared to clamor all the way north to the capital, immediately lose their arrogance. On the northwest side, everyone in the imperial court was saying that Bailiang's Bailiang cavalry was just an embroidered pillow that could not withstand a single blow. Fortunately, the Jizhou General Yuan Tingshan turned the tide and completely defeated the two Beimang cavalry of more than 10,000. In comparison, who in the world did not curse the good-for-nothing Bailiang frontier army and the trembling Su Fengnian who was always hiding somewhere? Chapter 1408. Song Tonglu naturally knew many secrets that even the assistant ministers of the 6 ministries should not know. For example, Beimang's infantry had paid a heavy price to break through 2 small cities outside Yuzhou Pass, the fall of Calabash Pass, and the appearance of Su Fengnian's Yuzhou cavalry. Even the Great Snow Dragon cavalry had entered the battlefield. However, these secrets should be kept to the grave. Song Tonglu also knew an interesting thing, that he had to grit his teeth even more. The current emperor liked to collect jade dolls, which were sculpted from various materials. They were detailed and lifelike, ranging from 1 inch to 4 inches, with 3 different heights between each inch. There were a total of 9 grades. Because of Song Li's illustrious military exploits that everyone in the capital knew about, the 2 cun tall jade statue, Song Li, stood on a table in a secluded study of the emperor. After Yuan Tingshan's military exploits, he jumped from 1.6 cun to 3 cun tall. There were relatively new jade figurines, such as Sun Yin, who had argued with the group of Confucians during the Imperial College's martial arts exhibition, Fan Zhongho, who had recently entered the capital, and Gao Tingshu, who was extremely eye-catching on the border of the Ministry of War. Yesterday, when Song Tonglu walked into the small study that only he, the head of the ceremony directorate, and 2 eunuchs on duty, entered, he found a brand new jade figurine. Even though there was no one in the room at the time, Song Tonglu, who was the head of the eunuchs, only dared to sneak a glance. He found that it was an extremely young stranger. Moreover, it was very different from the other jade figurines. This person had his eyes closed in concentration, like a blind man. Before Song Tonglu left the room, he had guessed the identity of this person. It was a blind chess player who, at his lowest, had no choice but to gamble in the shabby alleys of Qingzhou to make a living. It was a person who had no record in the Ministry of Appointments, Lu Su. There was no court meeting today. The emperor, Zhao Zhuan, could practice his set of martial arts when the sky was slightly bright. Recently, the empress had occasionally caught a cold and was not feeling well. The emperor had specially sent her to her maternal home to recuperate and relax. During this time, the emperor had not visited any woman. The common people often said that the emperor was not anxious, but the eunuchs were anxious. However, most of them did not know the true meaning. In fact, it was referring to a time like this. For a small family, there was a saying that there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants was the worst. For a vast and enormous dynasty, the ruler of a country without an heir was tantamount to an invisible disaster. The longer time passed, the clearer the countless bloody stories in the history books were. This was enough to trigger all sorts of unpredictable changes in the sky. However, no matter how carefully Song Tonglu and Diao Si tried to persuade him, the emperor, he still smiled and told Song Tonglu that he could occasionally do such things. When the empress was in the palace, he could occasionally do it, but now that the empress was in her maternal home was sick, he would not do. Song Tonglu sincerely admired him. Moreover, the emperor practiced martial arts every day. How could it be a boring thing to do to pass the time? Song Tonglu believed that the world would not believe that the current emperor, from the moment he ascended the throne, had already begun to prepare to become the longest reigning ruler of Liang. The emperor of Liang, the emperor of Zhao, had sat on the dragon throne for 34 years. However, that person only ascended the throne at the age of 35. Song Tonglu believed that it would not be difficult for the current emperor to do it. After Zhao Zhuan finished practicing his martial arts, he began to walk in small circles. At this time, he would talk to himself. Song Tonglu bent his waist and quietly took 8 steps back, not 1 step more and not 1 step less. This small rule was set by the previous head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, Han Xingxian. The rule was not big, but it was enough for Song Tonglu and his next head eunuch to scrupulously abide by it until death. Zhao Zhuan walked in circles and said softly, "For the time being, Sun Yin, who does not have an official position, is right. The vassal kings of various regions cannot hold the position of Jidushi. However, this change needs to be done slowly. First, in places where there are no vassal kings, we need to add deputy Jidushi. After 1.5 years, we need to find 2 officials from the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Appointments who have authority and bring up this matter. Then, starting from my big brother, we will add deputy Jidushi and promote it." According to what Sun Yin said, it will not take too long to find a vassal king with a dirty background and have the imperial censor write a letter of impeachment to remove him from the position of Jidushi. Sun Yin's choice of candidate is not very appropriate. And, in my opinion, the King of Han is a good candidate. Sun Yin, at such a young age, is able to figure out the emperor's intentions. He is more like an old fox like Yin Mao Chen. If not for the fact that you were born in Beiliang and had no choice but to continue observing, I would have restored you to your official position today. I would have even reserved the position of scholar of Chong Wenguan for you. Zhao Zhuan, who was walking slowly, raised his hands and rubbed his temples. Since Lu Xingxiang has become a general with real power, he has to resign from his position as the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War to make room for Gu Jintang's right-hand man who has followed him for many years. Firstly, this will suppress the influence of the martial artists from Guangling and Jiangnan. In such a large Ministry of War, Minister Liu Baijie, Assistant Minister Lu Xingxiang, and Su Gong are all from that side. This is too outrageous. Furthermore, promoting Tang Taihuang, who is not lacking in military merit and reputation, will prevent Gu Jiantang from becoming the second. Zhao Zhuan snorted coldly and did not continue to say the name that he had heard since he was young. In reality, he did not have much ill will toward that old man. On the contrary, deep in his heart, he had a different impression of him from the previous emperor. It was just that he had hidden it very well these past few years. Otherwise, he would never be able to take half a step toward that chair in this lifetime. But that person's son, Zhao Zhuan, really felt stifled whenever he thought of him. At this moment, he began to truly understand the previous emperor. There were 2 people from the previous generation, one was the ruler and the other was the subject. One was surnamed Xiao and the other was surnamed Su. The 2 young people of this generation were cut from the same cloth. Zhao Zhuan pressed his fingers against his temples and stopped walking. His voice was extremely soft as he laughed. The world is both envious and jealous of your surname, so they like to scold you. No matter what you do, it's all wrong. It seems like no one dares to scold me. Since you also feel that you can't cause your father to die in peace and are afraid that people will scold you and your father as slaves with 2 surnames, then I will let you die in peace. Zhao Zhuan suddenly frowned, as if he was asking himself, if I were in your position, would I betray Liang and rely on Beimang? Zhao Zhuan shook his head, not wanting to think about this meaningless question. He laughed loudly and could not stop himself from feeling pleased. Unfortunately, your surname will always be Su, and my surname is Zhao. My sons and grandsons will continue to bear the imperial surname for generations to come. As for you, you will be buried in the history books together with Beiliang's 300,000 steel cavalry. After you die, I will definitely ask those civil officials in charge of history to give you a few pleasant conclusions. On the easternmost front line of Beimang, the king of Bando, Jing Chong, who had just suffered a defeat in Jibei, brought only 200 of his personal cavalrymen and headed west in low spirits under the playful gazes of his colleagues. They were heading to Gusai province. Chapter 1409. His grandfather, who had lived to the age of 70 and was the clan master of the Yi clan in Southern Dynasty, had passed away. His great-grandfather, who was so old that he would be honored with the title of Yi clan in a few more years, was still alive. Although he no longer cared about the affairs of the clan and even ignored the officialdom of Southern Dynasty for many years, he was still alive. It seemed very awkward for a white-haired person to send off another white-haired person. However, the Wang clan, who had always been known as the fence-sitter in the western capital, was still prospering no matter how strong the wind blew. Wang Jingchong remembered that before the Melon Vine Rebellion in Southern Dynasty, many old people of spring and autumn period had already started to prepare for their deaths. Wang Jingchong's great-grandfather was not the first old man who wanted to be buried in his hometown in the Central Plains, and he was not the first old man who wanted to be buried in Southern Dynasty to show his goodwill to Norland. His great-grandfather was always in a slow and steady manner when doing things. If one were to put it bluntly, he was following the trend and was a utilitarian. However, Wang Jingchong knew that if it weren't for his great-grandfather's slowness in many matters and his trustworthiness in times of crisis, the Wang family would have been wiped out by a random storm, let alone climbing all the way from a D-class noble family to a second-class noble family. Wang Jingchong had a feeling that the successor of the clan master was not someone else, but him. As for why he and the other Ju both suffered heavy losses in Jibei, it was not because Wang Jingchong and the other man were really careless and slack, it was also not because their subordinates were weak, and it was also not because Yuan Tingshan's choice of timing and location was too wonderful, as Liang dynasty thought. The truth was that the imperial decree of peace had sent a message to both of them. In the Battle of Jibei, they could only lose, not win, and they could only suffer a small loss. While Wang Jingchong was riding his horse, he smiled. Whether it was Yuan Tingshan or Gu Jiantang, just you wait, Liang dynasty. In the old palace of Dechu. He was no longer the man in a green robe who had been waiting for the imperial decree for many years. He walked alone into the courtyard that had been abandoned for many years. In the past, this place was filled with national chess players, and he was the most proud of it. He searched for a long time, but he could not find the 2 chess jars that he used to place on the chessboard countless times. Before he walked out of the courtyard, he could only settle for the next best thing. He took the other 2 old chess boxes that he was familiar with. He said softly, "The next time I appear outside Tai and City, I will tell the world that Dechu was not a femme fatale back then." On this day, Chao Chengqing's Confucian Saint realm changed from the way of the king to the way of the overlord. In the eyes of outsiders, Nanjiang was a barren land with raging miasma. Since the founding of the Great Qin dynasty, it had always been regarded as a dangerous path to be an official. The emperor liked to demote those officials who were disobedient but could not be killed here. Zhao Bing, who was lucky enough to come here to be the king of Yanqi instead of the king of Huainan, had guarded the border conscientiously for so many years. He had strictly abided by the rules of the suzerain vassal state and never complained. Even his eldest son, His Royal Highness, and other sons had never spread any absurd acts in the north. This was enough to win sympathy. In addition, Zhao Bing had always been kind to the officials in his jurisdiction. Many civil officials who came here with the heart of death but returned to the north alive all admired Zhao Bing greatly. Occasionally, there were scholars in Jiangnan who made jokes about Zhao Bing and Nailan Yuxi's homosexuality, but Zhao Bing did not show any anger or shame. If it were not for the disappointment of His Royal Highness Zhao Zhu, who had a good reputation, perhaps more people would be close to Nanjiang. After all, they had high expectations for Zhao Zhu. After all, this young man who joined the army liked to go to the barbarian tribes to kill people. Compared with the heroic death of the king of Huainan Zhao Ying, it paled in comparison. Not to mention, there was also the rescue of the king of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, from thousands of miles away, which almost wiped out the whole army. Nailan Yuxi had always been an existence that made people see flowers in the fog. Some people described him as a character that should only appear in novels. It was rumored that he was more beautiful than a married woman. He used his beauty and military strategy to enchant the king of Yanqi, Zhao Bing. That was why he was willing to stay in Nanjiang for 20 years. There were also people who said with certainty that Mr. Nalan, the most luxurious person in Nanjiang, had 5 personal maidservants who could be said to be devastatingly beautiful. They were called Fengdu, Dongyue, Shishu, 3 Corpses, and Qinglu. There was no snow in Nanjiang in winter. As for the spring cold that could make famous people in Jiangnan feel cold to the bones, it was never chilly here. On the top floor of a 13-story lofty bookstore, a handsome middle-aged scholar in thin clothes was letting a group of orioles and swallows help him move books to dry them. He sat peacefully on a small red sandalwood couch, leisurely holding a book and reading. He sat up and put the yellowed book in his hand on his knee. He smiled and asked a young beauty with a plump figure who was closest to him, "I know that there are not many women in the world who are as beautiful as you, but it is easy for me to find a few more. But in the end, there are only 5 of you." The woman nicknamed Qinglu turned her head. Her eyes narrowed into 2 crescent moons as she smiled. "Mr. Nalan is so knowledgeable. How could I guess Mr. Nalan's thoughts?" The scholar joked, "With your flattery skills, when you entered the palace, you were at most a small concubine." The maid's smile became softer, and her eyes were infatuated. She was charming and natural. "But I really didn't mean to say good things for you." The man smiled warmly, blinked, and said mischievously, "I know. You 5 don't work. Go downstairs and play. Let me, the knowledgeable Mr. Nalan, study alone." The 5 people didn't hesitate at all and went downstairs with light steps. This scholar, who could be called a vassal king more than Zhao Bing, the king of Yanqi, could only be Nalan Yusi. He looked down at the book that his old friend gave him. It was just an ordinary Confucian classic. It was not like the exquisite engraved book, which was more valuable as it aged. This book was more than 20 years old. No one would be willing to accept it even if he gave it away. In terms of extravagance, Mr. Nalan, who was the best in Nanjiang, carefully kept it for more than 20 years. In addition to drying the book himself, he only took it out of the sandalwood box 2 or 3 days a year to read it. Zhao Bing once asked in private, "Xiaoyan, could it be that what he gave was not as good as an old book?" Nalan Yusi just shook his head. Fortunately, Zhao Bing never cared about this kind of detail. Nalan Yusi looked at his old friend's belongings that had no grave after his death and chuckled softly, "You are so poor that you don't even have a coin purse. You are so pitiful that you don't even have a coin purse. You and I traveled together to study in different countries. When we parted, you, who only had 2 books, gave me this book. How can the king of Yanqi compare with you? Is he really willing to give me half of his property?" Nalan Yusi raised his head, narrowed his eyes, and looked at the sky. "Fengdu, Dongyue, Shishu, 3 corpses riding shoes, 10 crosses. This is all of our hard work. Over the years, there have been 3 confirmed dead people. There are 2 missing people. There are 5 left, 1 more than you and I expected. It's enough. For these last 5 people, Zhao Bing killed tens of thousands of people in Nanjiang. Not to mention the refugees in Beiliang, nearly 10,000 people in the border army died." Nalan Yusi stretched out his hand to touch his forehead. His expression was extremely contradictory, as though he was sad and satisfied at the same time. He smiled softly and said, "You said that since there were wanderers, after hundreds of years of evolution, the wanderers no longer wandered and turned into aristocratic families, country, 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 the word country in front and the word family in front. You were just a poor scholar at that time. You told me that you wanted to try and let the scholars in the world put the country before the family again. For this reason, you set up this trap. In the end, except for those 5 people, only I know about it in the world. The tall building towered into the clouds, and wind came from all directions. A gust of wind blew, and Nalan Yusi's hair was dazzled. The book on his knee made a slight rustling sound. Nalan Yusi closed his eyes and listened carefully to the sound of the pages turning. The corner of his mouth curled up. You once asked me seriously, one day, when you suddenly die, how will you fight against life and death? I once answered, life and death is a small matter, but a close friend is a big matter. Where my heart is at peace, there is a pure land and a lotus pond. The spring breeze turned the pages of the book. It was just like the dead person turning the pages of the book. Chapter 14:10. The earth paste was thick, and when spring thunder struck, all things would happen. It was drizzling, and it was close to dusk. On the official road connecting Yenji Prefecture and Bishan County, 3 horses galloped. They finally made it to Will Street before dinner time. The 3 horses slowly traveled on the slightly muddy street and finally arrived at a secluded courtyard after a few turns. The 3 dismounted. Lu Yunzhang, who had the large frost saber on his back, had a suspicious look on his face. He didn't know why Yudilong wanted to come to this godforsaken place. When his master said that they would return to Liangzhou, this guy's face fell. He went back to his room and delayed for a long time. Through the door, he said that he had eaten something bad and asked Lu Yunzhang to accompany his master. Lu Yunzhang was immediately amused. With Yudilong's internal strength, even if he swallowed swords and knives, he wouldn't get sick. Lu Yunzhang teased him, could it be that you're pregnant? In the past, his eldest senior brother, who couldn't take a joke, would have used his fists to compare notes with him. This time, however, there was no reaction. Then, for some reason, his master said that they would go to Bishan County first. Yudilong immediately became lively and ran to the stables. He then took the horse and mounted it in one go. The Shitakian door was made of reed stalks. If Lu Yunzhang casually pushed it, it would open. However, after Yudilong tied the horse with familiarity, he solemnly straightened his clothes at the door and patted the rain stains on his shoulder. Only then did he seriously knock on the door. Soon, Lu Yunzhang saw the door slowly open. A woman in plain clothes walked out. Lu Yunzhang whispered, Yudilong, is that your mother? Yudilong was annoyed and subconsciously blurted out, it's your mother. He probably felt that if Auntie Pei became Lu Yunzhang's mother, then Lu Yunzhang's ancestors would be too proud. How was this scolding? It was clearly praising him. Yudilong quickly pulled a long face and said, don't be so cheeky. Call her Auntie Pei with me later. I don't care about other times, but if you don't behave properly today, I will really beat you up. Lu Yunzhang rolled his eyes, but he soon couldn't shift his eyes away. Goodness gracious, this big sister was truly beautiful. However, Lu Yunzhang quickly lowered his gaze. He wasn't a simple-minded fool. He had been at the bottom of the martial emperor city in the East Sea for so many years. Even though he was young, he was experienced. Even if he used his butt to guess, he would know that this absolute beauty was their master's, something. Following that, the elder sister's words and actions made Lu Yunzhang look at her in a different light. Who was his master? Putting aside the fact that he was the most powerful vassal king in the Liang dynasty, he had obtained the title of the world's No. 1 expert after spending a few years in the martial world. Lu Yunzhang even heard that the purple-clothed Xinyuan, the only female martial world alliance chief in the past few hundred years, was only his master's follower. However, this woman behind the tattered wooden door wasn't in a hurry to remove the door bolt. She had a cold expression and glanced at Su Fengnian with a faint smile. It was better not to smile. Even Lu Yunzhang felt a mysterious killing intent when he looked at her. She then said, Yo, what a rare guest. Lu Yunzhang, who was in admiration, almost couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. He was thinking that this was definitely a heroine. Furthermore, she was a true heroine who didn't care about worldly affairs but had top-notch martial arts. Otherwise, who in the world would have the strength and courage to give his master the cold shoulder? Yudilong held back his laughter, seemingly happy to see his master suffer. Su Fengnian coughed and waited for a moment. Seeing that she had no intention of opening the door, he said awkwardly, "I was a little busy. By the way, have you eaten?" Pei Nanwei ignored him. At this moment, Yudilong stretched his neck and smiled brightly. "Aunt Pei." Pei Nanwei smiled knowingly and opened the door for the three of them. She rubbed Yudilong's head. "You seem to have grown taller." Yudilong chuckled. The four of them walked into the house together. Lu Yunzhang looked around furtively but couldn't see anything special. It was just a very ordinary Beiliang family's house. There was a faint green vegetable garden in the corner and even a simple chicken coop. Yudilong kicked Lu Yunzhang. Lu Yunzhang whispered, "What are you doing?" Yudilong glared at him. Lu Yunzhang was stunned for a moment before he quickly squeezed out a smile. "Aunt Pei, my name is Lu Yunzhang. I'm Master's eldest disciple." After returning from the gourd, Yudilong, who had been carrying the cold saber on his back, expressionlessly raised his hand to grab the hilt. Lu Yunzhang, who didn't dare to risk his life with Yudilong, hurriedly said with a smile, Sorry. I'm Master's last disciple. Yudilong is my eldest senior brother. Master has another disciple called Wang Xing. She's my second senior sister." Pei Nanwei smiled and nodded. After entering the house, Pei Nanwei went to the kitchen to make some vegetables for the three of them. The four of them sat around the table with a stool each. Su Fengnian slowly picked up his chopsticks. Pei Nanwei asked, "When are we leaving?" Su Fengnian smiled bitterly. "You're chasing me away just like that." Pei Nanwei was silent for a moment. She suddenly frowned and said, "Aren't you still the registrar of Bishan County? How come you don't receive your salary?" "I went to the county office after the Lantern Festival. The household secretary said that you don't need to go to the office for roll call anymore. Later, I heard that the county magistrate and the county governor communicated and wanted to replace the registrar with a scholar from outside the county." Su Fengnian smiled. "It's not right to occupy the latrine but not take a shit. My salary is..." Realizing that Pei Nanwei was staring at him, Su Fengnian slapped his chopsticks and immediately changed his tune. He pretended to be angry and said, "Preposterous. Isn't this bullying? I'll find a chance to go to the county office to reason things out." Pei Nanwei said, "We'll go after dinner." Su Fengnian carefully asked, "There's no extra money at home?" Pei Nanwei said indifferently, "In order to live, who would complain about having more money?" Yudilong, who was born a poor child, had a deep expression on his face. He nodded and said, that's right. "Aunt Pei, you're right. In a moment, Master and I will go to the Bishan County office to ask for your salary. If you don't give it to us." Pei Nanwei smiled and said, "Speak properly. Don't fight." Yudilong nodded vigorously. He looked at Su Fengnian and said solemnly, "Master, in Beiliang, don't we get rewarded for military service? The money outside the gourd belongs to the big guys and doesn't count as mine. Why don't you give me 10 taels of silver in advance and I'll make up for it later on the battlefield? I'll leave the money with Aunt Pei first." Su Fengnian kicked his stupid disciple under the table. He smiled helplessly and said, "I don't have any money on me." Yudilong didn't give up and said, "Didn't we take 2 jars of chess pieces from the county capital? There's also a pawn shop on Lowell Street. I think they're quite valuable. Why don't you give me 40 or 50 pieces and I'll pawn them for 10 taels of silver first?" Su Fengnian touched his forehead and sighed softly. This little prodigal son, the 2 jujube wooden jars with 180 pieces each. Whether it was the frozen fish brain black chess piece or the snow white chess piece, in terms of material, not to mention 10 taels of silver, they wouldn't even be sold for 10 taels of gold. Moreover, this kind of antique was the same as collecting rare editions of books. It was very particular about whether one liked it or not. Moreover, this was the first imperial tribute of West Chu's palace. God knows if it was the favorite of some chess piece in the past. It was even possible that State Preceptor Li Mibi or Chao Chongqing had used it to play chess with others. Pei Nanwei asked unhappily, how old is he? How can he go to the battlefield to kill people? Su Fingnian looked at her and said calmly, he's my disciple. Yudilong was probably afraid that his master and Aunt Pei would quarrel because of him. He smiled and said, Aunt Pei, it's fine. I'm from Beiliang. Since I know martial arts, it's only right for me to go to the battlefield and kill the barbarians. In the future, after I've paid off the big guy's debt and made contributions to the military, I'll send the money to you. Can you help me save it? When the time comes, Aunt Pei can use it as you please. Pei Nanwei smiled and said, later, Aunt Pei will find someone to renovate the house and build a courtyard house. When the time comes, I'll specially reserve a room for you. While wolfing down his food, Yudilong raised his head and said excitedly, okay. After Su Fingnian finished eating, he put down his chopsticks and looked at Pei Nanwei. I'll go with you to the county office and let the 2 children wash the dishes. After the 2 of them each took an oil paper umbrella and walked out of the house, Lu Yunzhang sat cross-legged on a stool and looked at Yudilong who was busy cleaning up the dishes. He whispered, who exactly is Aunt Pei? Why does it seem like our master is quite concerned about her? Yudilong, who was in a good mood, had the thought of joking. He deliberately said mysteriously, Aunt Pei is amazing. There's no second in the world in martial arts, but there's a third in the world. Lu Yunzhang had a look of disbelief. Are you lying to me? Yudilong curled his lips and said, it's up to you to believe it or not. In any case, Aunt Pei can crush you with one finger. By the way, this is my house. When you visit in the future, remember not to freeload. You have to bring a gift. Lu Yunzhang grimaced. Yudilong happily ran to the kitchen with the bowls and chopsticks. I have a home. Su Fingnian and Pei Nanwei walked in the alley inside. Thank you. Pei Nanwei said indifferently, because of that child, Yudilong. There's no need. I like this child to begin with. As for that Lu Yunzhang, he exudes a vicious aura. I don't like him. Su Fingnian shook his head and said, you're wrong. If I were to ignore him, Lu Yunzhang would only be a formidable person in the pugilistic world at best. He would only be a martial arts alliance leader. However, if Yudilong isn't restrained, or if he doesn't have anything to worry about, he will be very terrifying. This child might have a chance of becoming the next Wang Xinji. Chapter 14:11. Su Fingnian felt a headache coming on. It's hard to say what the world will look like in the future, but after Huang Sanja transferred the fate of the 8 countries to Jianghu, the current Jianghu is like a bamboo forest. It's a year of spring, but soon, the bamboo will bloom. Once it dies, a large area will die. Everything within a radius of dozens or even hundreds of miles will die. Moreover, there won't be any bumper harvests in the future. It'll all be a small year. The more it's like this, the more outstanding my 3 disciples, Yudilong, Wang Xing, and Lu Yunzhang, will be. Especially Yudilong, who has the best opportunities and the highest achievements. When the time comes, he'll definitely stand alone. Perhaps he'll be the only immortal on Earth in the 100 years after my generation. Therefore, whether he has a family or not will make a big difference. Pei Nanwei smiled. That's why you're willing to come here and have a meal. It's really hard for you, the king of Beiliang, to worry about the country, its people, and the world while fighting against the Beimang barbarians. Moreover, you're even scheming against your own disciple. Aren't you tired? Su Fingnian said self-deprecatingly, it's fine to worry about the country and its people. I really don't have that kind of free time. In the end, I just want to protect the family business that Su Xiao passed to me. This is my bottom line. It's even better if I can do something good above my bottom line. If I can't do it, I won't force myself. However, I really don't want to add fuel to the fire or kick someone when they're down. As for the scheming you mentioned, perhaps there's no other way. When I see you Dilong, it's hard not to think of that Wang Xianji. He, Huang Longshi, and Zhang Julu are three people I hated in my early years, but in the end, I can't help but admire. Pei Nanwei suddenly said, I just heard the military news from the mouth of the gourd. It said that Crouching Bao City and Luanhe City were conquered by the Beimang barbarians. I thought you'd send a spy to tell me to move back to Mount Qingliang. These 2 days, people in Bishan City have been saying that you personally led troops to the mouth of the gourd and killed many barbarians. Does that mean I don't have to go to Liangzhou anymore? Su Fingnian smiled and said, if you don't like it, you don't have to go back. Also, to tell you the truth, if the Beimang army really goes south, Yuzhou will be the last of the 4 provinces in Beiliang. Pei Nanwei asked in confusion, later than Liangzhou. Su Fingnian nodded and said, the geographical situation dictates it. For example, Yuzhou is of little value and extremely difficult to conquer. Liuzhou was just an appetizer. It tasted spicy, but Beimang could finish it if he gritted his teeth. Lingzhou was a plate of delicacies, but it was a little far away, and the barbarians couldn't reach it with their chopsticks. Therefore, the main battlefield can only be in Liangzhou. The cities will attack and defend, and the light cavalry of both sides will wait for an opportunity to move. Even the first large-scale battle between heavy cavalry in history can happen. Pei Nanwei said softly, Beiliang Road is still too small, and there aren't enough people. Su Fingnian was a little helpless. What do you think? Back then, when Li Yang was controlling the various vassal towns, he had a lot of reference to Sun Ping's Kuadiji and Xie Guaning's Hongjianian county map. The territories of the various vassal kings, how many soldiers Su Zhao's Beiliang Road could support, and how many soldiers Zhao Bing's Nanjiang could support, were all calculated and deduced countless times. Since the middle of Yonghui's reign, all kinds of restrictions and support for Beiliang Road were built on the foundation of Beimang using Beiliang as the entry point to the south. Yuan Benshi was betting on the current situation. As for Zhao Bing's Nanjiang, it was used to target West Chu's re-establishment of Guangling Road. Otherwise, how could Li Yang still be so calm and composed after Yang Xinqing and Yan Jinchuan's defeat? Zhao Dun even had the leisure to take Gu Jiantang to Jizhou to see the scenery before his death, instead of going to the southern part of the capital to boost the army's morale. He also didn't rush the 2 Liao border armies to the south. The reason was very simple. In Zhao Dun's eyes, the re-establishment of West Chu wasn't a big deal that would harm the country's vitality. What he wanted to do was to control the situation and weaken the separatist forces of all the vassal kings outside Beiliang Road. He wasn't afraid of losing many battles in the early stages. On the contrary, he was afraid of Yang Xinqing. Yan Jinchuan won consecutive battles at the beginning, causing the Duke of Guangling, Zhao Yi, the Duke of Huainan, and the King of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, to have nothing to do with them. Otherwise, why do you think Yan Jinchuan, who was familiar with military affairs, would rush south to help Yang Xinqing? How could Lu Xingxiang not see the risks? After the war, why didn't anyone from the Ministry of War in the capital, including Lu Xingxiang, get punished? Pei Nanwei said worriedly, what if Zhao Bing, the Duke of Yanqi, doesn't send troops? Beimang's million-strong army is pressuring the border. Is the imperial court really not afraid of being attacked from the front and rear? When the time comes, can Gu Jintang's 2 Liao defend Tai and city alone? Su Fingnian smiled and said softly, you're underestimating Zhao Dun and those famous ministers of Spring of Eternal Hui. Vassal towns, eunuchs, relatives, civil officials, and local military generals have always been the 5 great evils of history. You might as well recall the situation of the Liang imperial court in the past 20 years, and the result of West Chu's re-establishment. Pei Nanwei said tirelessly, eunuchs meddling in politics didn't exist when the 2 Zhao emperors were alive, and there won't be any in the future. It's the same with the matter of relatives. If we're talking about party struggles, during the reign of Eternal Hui, there was Zhang Julu, who didn't amount to much. Now that Zhang Lu and Gu Lu have collapsed, although I don't know what will happen if someone else sits on the dragon throne, I know that before Zhao Dun died, he invited the Grand Chancellor of Shangyin Academy, Qi Yanglong, to Tai and City to be the appointed minister, to help the new emperor stabilize the court. As for the local military generals, after the collapse of Gu Lu, and with the example of Yang Shenqing and Yan Zhenchuan, the 2 old generals, everyone felt insecure. In addition, Gu Jiantang made concessions everywhere. Many military generals were thankful to be able to protect themselves. They really didn't have the heart to challenge the imperial court. Among the old vassal kings, the Duke of Huainan, Zhao Ying, died. The Duke of Jiaodong, Zhao Sui, was suppressed by Gu Jiantang to the point that he had difficulty breathing. As for Qingzhou, in order to show his loyalty, that person seems to have sacrificed thousands of elite cavalry, right? Then, Beiliang will fight to the death with Beimang. The most powerful Duke of Guangling, Zhao Yi, is restrained by West Chu, and it's inevitable that he will be injured. In addition, you said that the Duke of Yan, Zhao Bing, will soon be ordered to go north. Pei Nanwei reached out to stroke the hair on her forehead and smiled, as expected of the Spring of Eternal Hui. Su Fingnian sighed. Qi Yanglong didn't disappoint. The new imperial court did a lot of things well. They made an exception for the meritorious generals and added 6 academicians to the civil officials. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Su Fingnian lowered his head slightly and looked at the rainwater falling on the limestone floor in the alley and then disappearing. Zhang Julu is dead. Other than some hidden things, there won't be any changes. However, many of the marks that he and Zhang Julu left in the Liang dynasty will soon fade and then disappear without a trace. The Spring of Eternal Hui, written by Zhang Julu, is a book that can be flipped over at will. This is the most powerful part of the Liang dynasty. It looks like wind is blowing in all directions, but it's actually as stable as Mount Tai. In the end, it's because Zhao Dun left behind a lot of assets for the current emperor. The 2 walked slowly. There was still some distance before they reached the Yamen of Bishan district. Pei Nanwei wanted to say something but stopped. Su Fingnian turned to look at her and smiled. If you want to ask, then ask. Pei Nanwei looked at him. Don't you know what I want to ask? Su Fingnian closed his oil paper umbrella and suddenly squeezed under her umbrella. Pei Nanwei didn't show any strange expression. She thought that if the husband and wife went to the Yamen to quarrel and ask for money, it might be inappropriate for them to hold their own umbrellas. Their momentum would be weaker. Su Fingnian took the umbrella from her hand and walked side by side on the wheeled street after turning out of the alley. When I was on the way to the Shenwu city with Wudang Wang Xiaoping, I wasn't sure if I could survive under the hands of Catman Han Xingxian, so I told Wang Xiaoping some things from my heart. My father, Su Shao, has never been a narrow-minded person. He said that Beiliang Road and Liang Road are one family. It's okay to quarrel behind closed doors. If we can't live under the same roof, then we can move out and set up our own house next door. We won't interact with each other for the rest of our lives. But if others feel that they can take advantage of this opportunity and come to his house to show off, then Su Shao doesn't mind slapping them in the face. It's that simple. Of course, Su Shao also has a bottom line, which is me, his son, who is going to inherit his family business. As long as I don't die, even if the process of inheriting the family business is bumpy and not smooth, Su Shao can endure it. If I die in the hands of the imperial court, then he won't care about Beiliang anymore. He will definitely lead the 300,000 Beiliang frontier army and fight all the way to Tai and city. In the past, when I traveled Jianghu with old Huang, the empress at that time, now Empress Dowager Zhaoji, personally mobilized the imperial bodyguards to help me block a disaster. Obviously, as a woman, she can rely on her intuition to grasp Su Zhao's thoughts. Su Fengnian suddenly laughed to himself and said, "As for me, in the past, when I was in the capital, I boasted that I would guard the country for the people of the Central Plains. It wasn't true, but it wasn't a lie either. In any case, I have to help Su Xiao guard Beiliang. Isn't that the same as guarding the northwest door for the people of the Central Plains? It's the same thing, but we have different intentions." The corners of Pei Nanwei's mouth gently curved up. Su Fengnian looked at the yamen not far ahead and said softly, "That old woman in Beimang once said in front of everyone from the two dynasties that she is willing to rule the world together with Su Xiao. Doesn't it sound very heroic?" Pei Nanwei nodded and said, "Yes." Su Fengnian laughed and said, "This is a needle hidden in the silk floss." In the past, Su Xiao refused to rule by drawing rivers, and a group of generals who were unwilling to accept this left. If you say that this was Su Xiao's own doing. Later on, the imperial court allowed the Su family to ride their armored horses into Jianghu and use their blades against the people of the Wulin. How many low-level soldiers left? You definitely wouldn't be able to guess that it was more than 20,000. Not one of them wasn't an elite veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles. If Su Xiao was willing to accept the old woman in Beimang's suggestion, how many people do you think would have left? Su Fengnian stretched out a hand and twirled it. At least 100,000. Pei Nanwei suddenly understood and said, "So that's how it is." Chapter 14:12. Su Fengnian narrowed his eyes. During that snowstorm, Su Xiao met with that old woman outside the pass. Tuoba Bodhisattva and I each acted as coachmen. In the end, we parted on bad terms. However, if you think that Su Xiao didn't agree because he felt that Beiliang's army's morale would drop, then you're underestimating my father and Empress Murong too much. She privately promised Su Xiao and proposed a condition. You won't be able to guess it even if you beat me to death. Pei Nanwei casually said, "Isn't it that after we succeed, Su Xiao will be old and can only retire, but Su Fengnian can be the master of the Central Plains?" Su Fengnian was stunned. He couldn't help but curse. His face was full of shock as he said, "You can guess that?" Pei Nanwei rolled her eyes at him. "I couldn't guess it at first, but since you said it like that, I just can't believe it. Besides, Zhao Ji is a woman and so am I. Can't I guess Empress Murong's thoughts?" Su Fengnian praised from the bottom of his heart, "Amazing." Pei Nanwei suddenly said, "I'm not cold." Su Fengnian looked confused. Pei Nanwei twitched the corner of her mouth. "You're really afraid that I'll be cold and get splashed by the rain on my shoulder. Why don't you just turn the umbrella sideways to me? Aren't you being too sincere? Take your hand away." Su Fengnian resentfully withdrew his hand from Pei Nanwei's shoulder. The two of them walked through the county yaman's gate. Su Fengnian closed the umbrella. County Magistrate Feng Guan and County Prime Minister Zhuo Jing both lived behind the yamen. Su Fengnian, who was nominally the third in command of the county yamen, should also have a place. However, Feng Guan bullied him because he was young, ignorant, and had no foundation, and pushed him out. When they entered the mountain to suppress the bandits, they actually didn't do anything. It was only because Feng Guan, who was the first in command, got an above-average grade in the year-end evaluation. Zhuo Jing shared the leftovers. County Magistrate Bai Shank, who was a scholar going to Liang, successfully transferred to the Yuzhou army. As the two of them passed through the yamen, the Su officials of the 6th branch who were still on duty greeted them warmly. They had a good impression of Su Qi, the young registrar who had been missing for a long time and was unable to keep his seat. However, within their warm expressions, there was also a hint of playfulness in their eyes, both pity and schadenfreude. Su Fengnian relied on these clues to know what was going on. Although Registrar Su was about to pack up and leave, Feng Guan was not too unreasonable when he learned that this person had come to visit. After all, he was the main culprit. Otherwise, Su Qi would not have to leave Bishan County so quickly. In Yozhou's old calendar, not to mention a year and a half, how many disciples of the general class who worked in the yamen to make money could not be seen for years? Who told Su Qi, a disciple of a low-class general class, to not have a backer and to not understand the current situation and loiter around? Who in Yuzhou dared to not take the roll call seriously? It was said that in Lingzhou, under the reorganization of the provincial governor of the granary, a large number of disciples of noble families who didn't do proper work were taught a lesson. Feng Guan sat in the study and was playing with two new good items, the bamboo-carved Shaoshi Taisha paperweight and the bamboo yellow Lingji jade Rui Rui that was said to be made by the imperial family of the old southern Tang. After hearing the servant's report, he originally wanted to get up and go outside the study to deal with the matter. He was not going to let Su Qi drink a sip of hot tea. However, when the servant considerately mentioned that Registrar Su's wife was also coming along, the county magistrate understood. He put his butt back on the chair and said that he would meet the guest in the study and prepare tea. Feng Guan did not walk to the door of the study to welcome him. Then, the county magistrate saw the young man, who was supposed to be full of flattery, directly cross the threshold. He also did not take the initiative to greet him. What he did next was even more absurd. He actually had his wife, who was supposed to be a living widow, sit on the chair while he leaned against the chair. He asked, "If I remember correctly, the new registrar and county magistrate are both scholars from Beiliang. They are called Yang Gongshou and Zhu Ying, respectively. Previously, they were both students of Green Deer Cave Academy. Now, there is the great Confucian scholar Huang Qiang and others in charge of reviewing the essays of Beiliang scholars. That Yang Gongshou was the champion of a half-year review in Yuzhou. Let's not talk about him. How about Zhu Ying?" Feng Guan was still holding the exquisite bamboo carving in one hand and his other hand was still in the posture of inviting someone to drink tea. He was at a loss. For a moment, he didn't dare to look directly at the young man in front of him. Feng Guan felt that it was strange. Where did this kid get this authority from? Feng Guan did not even feel this kind of pressure from the governor of Yanji County, Hong Shandong. Feng Guan, who felt that he had lost all face, put down the bamboo rui ornament and drank a mouthful of tea to moisten his throat. Using the official voice that he had cultivated for many years, he said, "Su Qi." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "My name is Su Fengnian." Feng Guan was stunned for a moment. He sneered and said, "I am Zhang Jiulu." Feng Guan suddenly realized that the Grand Secretary was already dead. He flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped the table and said, "Su Qi, do you believe that I can arrest you and throw you into prison just because of your shameful words?" Pei Nanwei reached out two fingers and secretly pinched Su Fengnian's waist. She also imitated the county magistrate's tone. "Let's talk business." Su Fengnian snapped his fingers. Then, Feng Guan discovered that a gust of cold wind had appeared beside him. A black-clothed brawny man with a rigid expression was standing there. He took out a simple bronze, general's talisman, from his bosom and held it in front of Feng Guan's eyes. Feng Guan had heard that the high-ranking officers of the border army all had a general's talisman. It did not need to be used to mobilize troops. It only had one use, and that was on the battlefield. If the general died in battle, it would be handed over to the deputy general to command. If the deputy general died in battle, it would be handed over to the lieutenant general. If the lieutenant general died in battle, it would be handed over to the lieutenant general. However, Feng Guan was not sure if this was the general's talisman. Besides, even if he was beaten to death, he did not believe that Su Qi was some king of Beiliang. As a result, Feng Guan suddenly felt a surge of heroic spirit. He loudly reprimanded, "Su Qi, you are impudent. Do you really think this official is easy to fool?" The earthly branch death warrior who had followed Su Xiao for many years glanced at his new master. Su Fengnian waved his hand, and this expressionless figure disappeared in a flash. Feng Guan felt his hair stand on end. Su Fengnian did not know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out to grab two of Pei Nanwei's fingers, and the latter struggled to pull them away. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "Let's not talk about other things first. Give me your salary for the next few months. I'm waiting to be cooked at home." Feng Guan leaned back in his chair. "If you have something to say, we can talk it out. Killing people to silence them is not something I can do. There are hundreds of brocade cavalry under my rule in Bishan district." Rather than believing that this former secretary was some Su Fengnian, he was more inclined to believe that this fellow was a Beimang spy who had infiltrated Yuzhou. Pei Nanwei stretched out a hand and said calmly, "Pay up. 24 taels and 7 coins." Feng Guan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He forced a smile and said, "These two bamboo carvings were made by famous craftsmen in the spring and autumn period. They can be sold for at least 100 taels of silver. You can take them." Pei Nanwei sneered, "Use them to light a fire." "Enough. Besides, it's too dirty to use your hands. I want the silver." Feng Guan cursed angrily in his heart. He had only played with these two bamboo carvings. How was it dirty? Then did she not use the real money? She was really a woman with long hair and short knowledge. She was born with such a femme fatale appearance in vain. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "County magistrate, then I'll go to the household to get my salary." Feng Guan's legs were actually trembling, but he still pretended to be calm and waved his hand. He thought that as soon as the couple left, he would immediately have the torture room and the bailiffs arrest them. After Su Fengnian walked out of the study, he picked up the 2 oil paper umbrellas at the door. Pei Nanwei asked, "You're going to ask for your salary like this?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I'm just afraid that I won't be able to reason with him. Besides, with his eyes wandering around your body, I'm afraid that before I can say anything, I won't be able to resist slapping him to death." Slapping Feng Guan to death is actually not bad. Anyone can be this kind of official. It's just right to make room for Yang Gongshou and Zhu Ying. Pei Nanwei's expression was a bit strange. Su Fengnian received his salary from the Yamen office in the front yard. Naturally, Su Li didn't dare to show any attitude to the secretary who had the county magistrate's imperial edict. When they walked out of the Yamen, they found that the rain had stopped. Su Fengnian softly said that Yang Gongshou is nothing, he only knows how to write some beautiful essays that are not supported by any spiritual energy. Zhu Ying, on the other hand, is not famous in the academy at the foot of the Green Deer Mountain, but she has a lot of critical essays on current affairs, all of which are placed on Fu Shui's desk. In the end, even my heir Jia was alarmed. She specially wrote a letter to me saying that this person is very useful. It's just that compared to Chen Shiliang and Su Beiji, she is too sharp, stubborn, and unforgiving. Several times, she even forced Wang Chang to invite a great scholar to give a lecture. Pei Nanwei said with a cold face that Yang Gongshou is not a good person. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I knew it. Is this person pestering you? Fu Shui's spy hasn't told me about this. Is it something that happened recently?" Chapter 14-13. There was no anger on Pei Nanwei's face. "Last time when I went to the Yamen to collect my debt, this person came to Bishan County to take up his post. He's probably waiting for the prefectural governor's official approval and has nothing better to do. Every time I go out to buy something, he'll appear. At least he still has the face of a scholar. He won't come near me and will just recite poems from a distance. His level might be on par with yours in the past. Su Fengnian couldn't help but laugh. How is that possible? When I bought poems from Beiliang scholars, they were all expensive and the content was good. Pei Nanwei and Su Fengnian were about to turn into an alley when 4 or 5 ruffians, who seemed to be waiting for them, surrounded them with smiles on their faces. Pei Nanwei glanced at Su Fengnian. The latter frowned and muttered to himself, "Hasn't Bishan County experienced the power of the brocade cavalry? How can someone have the guts to cause trouble at a time like this?" Very quickly, the answer came to light. In the time it took for the ruffians to surround them, a hero came to save the damsel in distress. Not far behind Su Fengnian and Pei Nanwei, a man in white clothes and carrying a sword appeared. He was very handsome and elegant, and his posture was very elegant. He also had a sword at his side, which seemed to be worth a lot. When he saw Su Fengnian beside Pei Nanwei, a trace of sadness and disappointment flashed across his eyes. But very quickly, this emotion turned into passion and endless fighting spirit. He didn't even need to use his sword. His sword moved like a swimming dragon. With a light shout, he stepped forward quickly and sent out a palm strike from 7 or 8 steps away. Immediately, one of the ruffians seemed to be swept away by the powerful palm strike. His feet left the ground and he crashed into the wall of the alley. The white-clothed swordsman sent out another palm strike. Another ruffian's body spun several times before he fell to the ground, moaning in pain. The corner of Pei Nanwei's mouth twitched. She turned her head away, refusing to look at this idiot. Su Fengnian stretched out his fingers to pinch her chin and gently turned her head back. He held back his laughter and said, "You are a hero who draws his sword to help when he sees injustice on the road. It's also very hard for you, okay? You should at least finish watching the show." The white-clothed swordsman was busy showing off his dense inner strength and peerless martial arts, so he did not see this scene. Otherwise, he would have probably spat out blood. One palm after another, he beat the group of ruffians until they were scared witless. Some even struggled to get up and rush toward the white-clothed swordsman. But before they could even touch the corner of the swordsman's clothes, they were swept away by the swift and fierce wind from his palms. They flew sideways, backward, and spun away in all kinds of wonderful poses. Su Fengnian turned his head and explained to Pei Nanwei in a low voice, "When I did this kind of thing in the past, I spent more than 200 taels. Because at the beginning, I had the imperial bodyguards in the palace pretend to be ruffians. It was too fake. It was my first time doing this, and I had no experience." Those 7 or 8 imperial bodyguards were clearly flirting with the girl, but when they opened their mouths, it was as if they were going to kill her whole family. The girl was so scared that she almost fainted. She cried and said don't kill her, and she would do anything. In the end, I had no choice but to explain. Guess what? That delicate and pretty girl was not shy at all. She directly asked me if I was married, and the result scared me. I was laughed at by Li Hanlin and the others for half a year. After that, I hired ruffians from the marketplace to act in this kind of show. In advance, we had to agree on how to fight. This kind of wind from the palm strike style was easy to deal with as the price was low. If we used knives, people would have to raise the price. But at that time, I gave money according to my mood. I estimated that no matter how stingy this brother was, he would have spent at least 20 or 30 taels. Yu Dilong and Lu Yunzhang, who were squatting at the entrance of the alley, were also dumbfounded. When the swordsman, who was sweating profusely from just using his palms, finally finished his work, those ruffians followed the rules and shouted things like, "Young swordsman, spare our lives," and "Young swordsman's martial arts are amazing." Then, they supported each other and left. Pei Nanwei covered her mouth and laughed. Because in her ears, Su Fengnian had already said these words before them. The former head of Beiliang's scourge was full of pride. How is it? It's all the same, right? I'm the founder of this kind of thing. Back in the day, who knows how many hedonistic sons of rich parents in Liangzhou and Lingzhou learned from me. The white-clothed swordsman, whose back was facing the two, hurriedly took a few deep breaths. When his breathing stabilized, he turned around with a smile and walked towards Su Fengnian and Pei Nanwei. Just as he was about to speak, two troublemakers appeared out of nowhere. The taller one of them shouted at the eyesore next to Miss Pei, "Master, mistress, senior brother, and I will find an inn to stay in. Otherwise, we won't be able to sleep on the same bed. Let's go." Su Fengnian saw the two brats run away like a wisp of smoke. His expression was somewhat awkward. Pei Nanwei sneered, "You've taken in a good disciple." The white-clothed swordsman in front of them was the newly appointed registrar of Bishan County, Yang Gongshou. When he saw that Su Qi standing next to the woman he admired, his heart was broken. He had long heard of the beauty of the Rouge woman. Something like, if you marry a wife, you should marry a woman from Lingzhou. If you take a concubine, you should take a Rouge woman. At first, he thought it was just some old lecherous official's dirty talk. However, when he saw the woman who appeared in the yamen, his soul left his body. Later, when he heard that she was already married, he had a painful battle between heaven and man. In the end, he couldn't control himself. Yang Gongshou didn't really want to do anything. He just wanted to find an opportunity to appear in front of her. Later, when he saw that his talent in poetry was useless, he felt that his path might have been wrong. Since Beiliang had a fierce culture, perhaps she liked the path of a great hero. Thus, this happened. Su Fengnian reached out and grabbed Pei Nanwei's slender waist. He smiled and said, "This great hero must be a master in Jianghu. Do you have a thunderous nickname?" Yang Gongshou opened his mouth slightly. He really forgot about this. However, he did have talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become so famous in Green Deer Cave Academy. He cupped his fists and smiled, "I am Yang Gongshou. People in Jianghu call me the sword of poetry." Not far away, a young scholar clapped his hands and walked over. He laughed and said, "Brother Wenfu, when we climbed Green Deer Mountain, we were already panting like a cow halfway up the mountain. I don't know how you managed to achieve great success today. Could it be that you've been possessed by the heavens?" Yang Gongshou was exposed. He wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Luckily, Miss Pei had already left with that person. Yang Gongshou's face was red. In the end, he couldn't say anything vicious. He just snorted coldly. That scholar stood with Yang Gongshou. He looked at the two people's backs as they walked into the alley. He laughed softly and said, "A fair and graceful lady is a good match for a gentleman. Brother Wenfu, you and I didn't see eye to eye before. However, after today, your dislike for me has increased greatly. I actually have some good feelings for you." Yang Gongshou flung his sleeves and walked toward the county yamen in large strides. That person smiled and shook his head, "Yang Gongshou, oh Yang Gongshou. Do you really think those two people couldn't see through your clumsy tricks? I'm saving you from being treated like a monkey." Walking in the alley, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Maybe that Yang Gongshou won't appreciate it and will only think that Zhu is undermining him." Pei Nanwei, who had once been on the Rouge Review board, didn't have any ripples in her heart towards this farce. She said, "That Zhu shouldn't be suitable for officialdom, right?" Su Fengnian sighed softly and said, "If it was in Liang, unless there was a Bo Lu who had a unique insight and was tolerant of people, Zhu shouldn't be able to make a name for himself. There is one thing that is very bad about being a scholar." Pei Nanwei asked, being swayed by emotions. Su Fengnian nodded. "Scholars have more feelings than ordinary people. The more they read and know, the more they know about history, and inevitably, their thoughts become heavier. The more talented they are, the weaker their sense of propriety is. They don't like to control the situation. To be precise, it's disdain. They are too lazy to feign civility with people and things. When looking at people and doing things, it's easy to be black and white. That's what you call being swayed by emotions. That's why those literary heroes in history often didn't become officials. This kind of strange phenomenon can't be explained just by having high standards but low ability. Fortunately, this doesn't matter to them. Emperors, generals, and ministers are all just a handful of soil. Only drinkers and poets leave their names behind. Drowning their sorrows in wine and writing famous poems, isn't that great? Thousands of years later, it's naturally easier for people to remember them than those emperors, generals, ministers, and high-ranking officials. The two returned to the courtyard. Pei Nanwei carried two small wooden stools and placed them under the eaves. She looked at him, who was sitting quietly beside her. She said, "It's hard to imagine that you're His Royal Highness, the one who killed people in the reed marsh." He didn't say anything. She casually asked, "I heard the people on the street say that there's a turning point in Guangling Road. West Chu has been defeated. Do you think Chao Chongqing will make a move? Or wait until the king of Yan goes north?" He shook his head. The king of Guangling should be going to accompany the king of Huainan soon. Only then will the king of Yan's army confront Chao Chongqing. She asked, "You're willing to come this time and say so much? Are you saying your last words?" He didn't say anything again. The two were silent for a long time. In the night, there wasn't much to see. She looked at the sky and finally said, "It's rare for a powerful man to treat a woman like a person, right?" He said softly, "Maybe not a lot, but definitely not a few. It's just that your luck isn't too good and you haven't met one." Pei Nanwei rested her chin on her knees and murmured, "But, it's not good to not treat a woman like a woman all year long, right?" After saying this, she stood up and walked into the room. Her figure was graceful. Chapter 14:14. After dawn, Yu Dilong and Lu Yunzhang left the inn on Luan Luo Street and came to the entrance of the courtyard. They squatted on the left and right like two door gods. Waiting was really boring. Lu Yunzhang yawned and patted his mouth. He asked casually, "Earthworm Yu, do you know what's the most important thing after spring this year?" Yu Dilong was wondering if his junior sister, Wang Xing, was used to living with the white fox face. He wondered if she had found one or two brand new famous swords in Beimang and if she had fought with anyone. He didn't hear what Lu Yunzhang, who often claimed to be the loudspeaker of the pugilistic world, was saying. After all, nothing good could come out of Lu Yunzhang's mouth. Yu Dilong didn't understand what Wang Xing meant. Lu Yunzhang was also used to Yu Dilong's absent-mindedness, so he said to himself, in the past, there were a total of 7 reviews for the civil and military reviews, general reviews, and rouge reviews. They would put the military reviews as the finale and put the rouge reviews at the end. This time, the auspicious talisman review, which was jointly reviewed by Naylan Yisi and Xie Guinying, is different. It seems to pay special attention to the civil and military reviews. They actually put the military reviews at the front. Yu Dilong replied, "Oh." Lu Yunzhang asked curiously, "Aren't you curious about our master's ranking on the martial arts review?" Yu Dilong said casually, "That's not fair. Doing this when master is seriously injured. If master's ranking isn't good, I'll find trouble with them after Beiliang defeats the Beimang barbarians and I've learned martial arts." Lu Yunzhang rolled his eyes and said, "This year, there are a total of 14 people on the martial arts rankings. The 4 grandmasters and the top 10 experts have been reintroduced. Master, Tuoba Bodhisattva, Dong Tai, and Chao Chongqing are known as the world's 4 grandmasters. Next is the top 10 experts. It's said that there's no ranking. Li Yang has Chen Jibao, Su Yanbing, Gu Jiantang, Mount Hui Xianyuan Qingfeng, and the head of the Wu family sword tomb. Beimang has Huyan Dagwan, Luo Yang, Hong Jingyan, Murong Baoding, and Deng Mao. Udilong frowned. How come that white fox face, the tall Guanyin sect master and the white-browed old man who likes to eat swords are not on the list? I think they're all pretty good. Lu Yunchang joked. In the future, when you find Xia Guining and Nalan Yusi, ask them yourself. How would I know why? Udilong nodded his head seriously. Lu Yunzhang said in surprise, Are you really going? Udilong turned to look at him and asked, Do you know what the Sihiyuan Antipay mentioned is? Lu Yunzhang nodded and said, There are many such courtyards in the Central Plains. They are divided into multiple entrances and exits. Many rich people's mansions are quadrangles. Udilong asked in a low voice, That would cost a lot of silver, right? Lu Yunzhang curled his lips and said, There's only one street in the entire county city, Jade Mountain. If you spend a few taels of silver, you can get it for 40 to 50 taels at most. Udilong said angrily, 45 taels is not enough. Lu Yunzhang, who was carrying the great frost saber on his back, picked his earwax. You're the only one who's short-sighted. As our master's disciple, isn't it easy for you to ask for a courtyard in Mount Qingliang? That place is valuable. Even 10,000 taels of gold can't buy it. Look at how many officials and generals are in Beiliang. Isn't only Deputy Administrator Song Dongming the only one who can have a residence in Mount Qingliang? Udilong sneered, What do you know? Lu Yunzhang retorted, You don't even know shit. Udilong reached out to touch the hilt of his cold saber. Lu Yunzhang suddenly stood up, Udilong, do you really think I'm afraid of you? My great frost saber has long been thirsty for blood. At this moment, Su Fengnian held his waist with one hand and opened the door with the other. When he saw his two disciples at the door at daggers drawn, he said in annoyance, If you want to fight, get lost and fight further away. Udilong looked at his master's complexion and said with guilt and horror, Master, why are you injured again? Could it be that there were Beimang assassins last night? Su Fengnian's expression was strange, and Lu Yunzhang's smile was even stranger. This fellow fawningly said, Master, I'll help you get on the horse later. Don't sprain your waist again. Su Fengnian kicked Lu Yunzhang away from the doorsteps, take the horse and set off for the Liangzhou Protectorate. Udilong asked cautiously, Master, are you really okay? Su Fengnian put on a stern face and said in all seriousness, There are some defeats that can't be recovered after losing. The older a man is, the more this is the case. Udilong thought carefully, Master is already a grandmaster. It seems the enemy is very powerful. By the way, Master, is Antipay all right? Su Fengnian was about to speak when Lu Yunzhang shouted, Antipay, let's go with Master. Master's waist can't take it anymore. It's difficult for him to get on the horse. Lu Yunzhang mounted his horse and galloped away. Su Fengnian and Udilong mounted their horses one after another. Su Fengnian said with a fake smile, Udilong, go and beat up your junior brother. Udilong clenched his right fist with his left hand and rubbed it fiercely. His face was filled with killing intent. Then, the child asked, Master, what's the reason? Su Fengnian asked, Does eldest senior brother need a reason to beat up youngest junior brother? Udilong spurred his horse and chased after Lu Yunzhang. Su Fengnian looked at the child's back and chuckled, just like how you miss Wangxing. There's no need for a reason. Su Fengnian took a deep breath and looked back at the courtyard. Let's go. The word love does not know where it begins or where it rests. Does not know where it begins or how it is resolved. Does not know where it ends. From the clan that lived in luxury, to Xiangfan City in Qingzhou, to northern Liang, where the sky was higher than the central plains. He lived by the shore of Tide Hark Lake on Mount Qingliang, and finally came to a poor little county in Yanji County. Like a rootless and weak reed, Pei Nanwei had never felt so at ease even though she had to deal with daily necessities such as rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. Princess Liang's Rouge Rating, Princess Liang's Rouge Rating, and Madame Liang's rouge rating. She lazily got out of bed and made breakfast as usual. Last time, she was busy the whole afternoon for the New Year's Eve dinner. She made 8 or 9 dishes and then placed 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks on the table. She sat at the table and thought about the vegetable garden in the corner and the slightly larger vegetable garden in the back of the courtyard. When would there be a harvest? She thought that after breakfast, she would open the chicken coop and see if there would be a surprise. She thought about the more than 20 taels of silver she got from the county government last night and the more than 30 taels of silver she saved before. According to the price of the masons and carpenters in Bishan County, she could build a decent small courtyard house. Unfortunately, the world in Yuzhou was not peaceful now. If it was last year, she could save a lot of money. Pei Nanwei looked around. Last year, she bought a lot of things for the New Year's Eve. At that time, she was distressed and secretly complained that she shouldn't be so extravagant. Now the price had increased, which made her feel more and more that she was actually quite good at managing the house. Pei Nanwei cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks and said to herself, "It doesn't matter if you don't come often. It's good that you can come. So don't die." She suddenly blushed and said softly, "What's the number 1 in the world?" You still went out rubbing your waist. In the hinterland of Aquarius State in Beimang, the ice and snow melted and everything grew green. A horse galloped along the back of the hillside to the top of the mountain. A girl was running behind the horse. In addition to the huge sword box on her back, she also had many swords tied with hemp ropes. She looked like a Jianghu swindler who sold swords to cheat people. The person sitting high on the horse was an extremely attractive woman. She was Nangong Push, the champion of the last Rouge evaluation. Chen Yu, who was second place, only got the evaluation of not inferior to Nangong. In the new evaluation of the second year of Xiangfu, there were more than 14 people in the Wushu evaluation, but there were only 4 people in the Rouge evaluation. This person, who was given the nickname White Fox Face by His Royal Highness, was still on the list. The other 3 people were Chen Yu, who was about to be married to the new king of Liaodong, Zhao Wu, Jiang Ni of West Chu, and a woman who was raised in a house and unknown to people called Huyan Guanin. According to the obscure description of the Rouge evaluation, she should be a woman from the grassland of Beimang. In the end, she was kidnapped by Su Fengnian, the king of Beiliang, and kept as a mistress. Chapter 14-15. Ever since Wang Xing entered Beimang, she had been running behind Mr. Nangong. Many times, she had to stop and was required to run her qi. The girl had fainted 7 or 8 times. She was like a smart child who met the most demanding private school teacher, who wanted the child to recite the classics in her sleep, regardless of whether it would spoil the growth or not. It should be noted that except for the red sandalwood sword case, Wang Xing's other famous swords could only slightly hide the sword qi in their scabbards. Every time the girl was exhausted and her qi was disordered, the unruly famous swords of the past would come out to add fuel to the fire. The thin sword Moose Fish, the 3-inch blade Dogwood forged by the Confucian sage of the old northern Han, the Taoist talisman sword Yellow Crane, the sword that pierced through the abdomen of the emperor of Dongyue in the past, the Xiao Diao with the tip of the sword exhaled like spring thunder, the Yu sword that clashed with the sword qi of other famous swords, and the Goose Yellow sword that was as lively as a girl in love. The sword case and the 7 swords made Wang Xing look like a funny hedgehog. As she and Elder Nangong headed north, there was no lack of discerning northern Mang experts who wanted to kill and rob them. Elder Nangong never cared if the young girl could deal with them or not, always watching with folded arms. Only when Wang Xing was injured by sword energy that was like a flood bursting through a dike, would he save the young girl. Then, he would tail those extremely unlucky northern Mang martial practitioners from a distance that was neither too far nor too close. Every time the young girl leisurely woke up, she would be thrown into the battlefield by Elder Nangong, repeating this process until Wang Xing successfully killed someone. Before this, in eastern Jinzhou, the two had encountered a Beimang cavalry of more than 1,000 people. Mr. Nangong also threw her directly into the battlefield. Wang Xing, who could only control 3 or 4 swords at most, was in a frenzy and killed more than 300 Beimang cavalrymen with 7 swords. Her life was hanging by a thread. When she was about to use all the swords in the sword case, Mr. Nangong rushed into the battlefield and knocked her unconscious. When Wang Xing woke up, she found that the Beimang barbarians were all dead and Mr. Nangong, whose clothes were as clean as new, was standing among the corpses. On the top of the mountain, Bai Hu led the horse and looked into the distance. She asked, "Do you know why the saber is always inferior to the sword?" Wang Xing shook his head. If her master wanted her to practice the sword, then she would practice the sword. His master had once said that he was the best sword embryo in the world, and that it would be a pity if he didn't practice the sword. In fact, Wang Xing felt somewhat regretful. Although his master often used swords, his master's martial path had begun with saber training. Therefore, Wang Xing would occasionally envy the glib-tongued Lu Yunzhang. Especially when she heard that Elder Nangong, who wore the spring thunder embroidered winter twin sabers on his waist, had once given a saber to her master who had traveled the Jianghu twice. This made the young girl even more reluctant to tell others. Bai Hu patted Wang Xing's head and said softly, "People are afraid of being serious, and things are afraid of being serious. Wang Xing, if you don't want to be his dispensable disciple for the rest of your life, then think about this problem carefully." Although Wang Xing did not understand, he still nodded his head out of habit. Bai Hu smiled and said, "There are millions of swords in the world, and they all have a master. As long as you can defeat her in the future, your master will have a whole new level of respect for you. In this world, there has never been a woman who has become the most powerful person in the world." Wang Xing exclaimed in surprise and said timidly, "Elder Nangong, are you talking about that West Chu princess with the surname Jiang? But she has been able to fly on her sword for a long time. I can't defeat her, right? And I heard that she's really good looking." Bai Hu sighed and said, "You silly girl." Wang Xing tiptoed slightly and fastened the few loose swords tightly. He then looked up and smiled at Elder Nangong and said, "Sir, if my master is no longer the most powerful person in the world in the future, you can take his place." Bai Hu patted the young girl's head and said helplessly, "You're really silly." Wang Xing hesitated for a moment and finally plucked up the courage to ask, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" Bai Hu said softly, "You want to ask why you came to Beimang?" Wang Xing nodded slightly. The most beautiful woman in the world raised her head slightly and laughed heartily. "Wang Xing, do you know what realm I'm in? I'm still stuck at the mysterious finger level. When I left the Tide Listening Pavilion, it's not that I couldn't reach the celestial state, nor that I couldn't become a master in the next martial arts evaluation. It's just that to me, as long as I'm not the most powerful person in the world, it's meaningless." Bai Hu loosened the reins and gently pressed her hands on the hilts of the spring thunder and winter embroidered sabers. He took a step forward and said, "Just one more step." This was the first time the young girl Wang Xing saw Elder Nangong in such high spirits. It was really beautiful. The Dongyue sword pool had countless engravings on the legendary cliff. Among them, the 2 words, sword pool, in the ancient seal script of the Great Qin dynasty and deep water, high mountain, long sword qi written by Chao Xing of the Dafeng dynasty were the most charming. Beside the sword pool, there were mountains and rocks. The water in the pool was green and the water rose and fell. The height of the water varied throughout the year. However, what was special about the sword pool was that during the rainy seasons of spring and summer, the water level of the sword pool would decrease and fall. The 7 words, deep water, high mountain, long sword qi, could be seen from top to bottom. On the contrary, during the second half of the rootless heavenly water season, the height of the water did not drop the word deep, leaving only the solitary word water in sight. The Song family of the sword pool had existed for more than 600 years, much longer than the Donghua kingdom. However, ever since the Wu family's sword tomb appeared, the sword pool, a holy land of swords, had become a place of regret in the eyes of many. Unlike the Wu family's sword tomb, which worshipped ancient swords, the Song family had persisted in the principle of the old man is better than the new sword, but the new sword is better than the old, in the hands of the previous grandmaster, Song Nianqing. Every swordsman of the Song family who had achieved success in swordsmanship had to throw his old sword into the sword pool before leaving for Jianghu and personally go to the sword furnace to forge a new sword. Outsiders had always been puzzled by this and felt that it was a beautiful wish of the old man, the new sword. After Song Nianqing's death, Chai Qingshan, who had once been the guest of Prince Xiao Yi of Guangling, returned to the sword pool after being expelled. This Grand Master of swordsmanship who had never had a disciple had finally, belatedly, taken in 2 disciples. The young man was a brilliant disciple of the Song family and the young girl was an unpolished jade covered in dust. The 3 of them stood on a huge rock of the Spring God Lake in the sword pool that was engraved with the words, "The enemy of 10,000." The rock was as large as a small mountain, square and extremely majestic. The old man without a sword lowered his head and looked at the deep and ancient spring water. His voice was hoarse as he said, "My senior brother was defeated by Li Chungang back then. He didn't commit suicide, but rather, he died from injuries." The family head, Song Nianqing, had died in the pugilistic world outside the sword pool last year. It wasn't because he had died of old age, but because he had used all of his 14 new swords. He had even sacrificed his life to use a sword at the level of an earth immortal. However, he was still killed openly. I'm telling you these 2 things because I want you to understand one thing. Other than the sword tomb of the Wu family, there are many swordsmen who don't care about the sword pool. There are many more than you can imagine. Chai Qingshan probably felt that this truth was too cruel for the 2 children. He laughed and said self-deprecatingly, "Other than an old man like me, the sword pool has a reputation in Jianghu. You should call him senior brother, Li Bai. He has no hope of reaching the peak of swordsmanship." Compared to people of the same age like Wu Luding of the Sword Tomb, swordsman Cui Hua and Qi Xianxia of Longhu Mountain, the gap is not only in swordsmanship and sword moves, but also in vision and breadth of mind. So you are the last seeds of the sword pool. Tell me, is there anyone you must surpass when practicing swordsmanship? The youth with a jade-like face had a lively personality. He smiled brightly and said, "First, senior brother Li Bai, then you, master. After that, we will go to the sword tomb of the Wu family and look for Dong Tai. If we can't find him, we will go to Beiliang." At this point, the youth pointed at the girl beside him and complained, "Master, junior sister is no different from many of the girls in the sword pool. She secretly admires the king of Beiliang, Su Fengnian. Every time we gather and talk about that guy, TSK, their eyes are like the water of the pool under our feet, green and shiny. Master, this is too outrageous. That guy surnamed Su is the mortal enemy of our sword pool. In any case, there isn't a man in the sword pool who doesn't want to use a sword to kill Su Fengnian." The girl's delicate face flushed red. She flew into a rage out of humiliation and shouted, "Song Tinglu, shut your stinky mouth. No one will treat you as a mute." Then, the girl looked at her master guiltily, afraid that she would make her master unhappy. Chai Qingshan dismissed it with a smile and said with emotion, "It's not a bad thing that love lasts for a long time. Su Fengnian, has he become the Li Chungang in the hearts of my generation?" At this moment, an old woman with white hair and vicissitudes of life staggered over. Chai Qingshan and the youth walked down from the boulder. The youth ran over to help the old woman and shouted with a smile, "Great-grandmother, are you here to enjoy the scenery while the sun is good?" The old woman stroked the youth's head with a kind gaze. "Tinglu, remember to learn the sword well from your master. You have to be diligent. As for whether you can master it or not, it's up to you." Remember, if you go out in the future, you have to come home properly. Chai Ching Shan nodded in greeting. The old woman smiled and nodded. After the three of them left, the old woman sat by the pool with a serene bearing. She smiled and said, Nianqing, I used to wait for you. I waited for many years and many times. No matter how long it took, I would always be able to wait for you to come home. She folded her skinny hands on her knees. Her red hair from back then had gradually turned white. In her life, she was used to staring at his back. The words between husband and wife might not even be as much as the teachings between husband and disciple. Every time he left the sword pool and returned to the sword pool, she would stand at the entrance of the sword pool. He never looked at her. She did not regret it. Chapter 14-16. The old man closed his eyes and murmured, Nianqing, now you're the one waiting for me. In Jiangnan's water town, there were many small bridges and flowing water. The young man nicknamed Bamboo wandered the streets of the town for an entire day before returning home in the dusk. His mother had closed the cloth shop and was preparing food at home. The young man buried his head in eating. The woman who had brought her son to this town the year before last said softly, Eat slowly. No one will steal from you. The young man only cared about wolfing down the food. The woman smiled, Your brother Wen is already married. I don't expect you to find a good girl like the young lady of the Liu family. It's fine if you can just kidnap one back. The young man's mouth was full of food as he mumbled, I know. She sighed, Don't just stay outside all day doing nothing. I don't want you to earn money. It's just that it's not good for a man to always be doing nothing. When a woman marries, she always likes to find a man who has work to do. Even if she's poor at the beginning, she'll have something to look forward to. Her days will be more comfortable. The young man suddenly slammed the bowl in his hand onto the table. His face was full of anger as he roared, Yes, I'm not doing proper work. But even if I'm like my father, what's the use? My father is famous for being an honest man, isn't he? Anyone who does farm work would give him a thumbs up, right? What's the result? Didn't he leave us behind for so many years? We don't even know if he's dead or not. If he comes back one day, I won't recognize him as my father. Bastard! Her eyes were red. She was originally a gentle woman. Although her voice trembled, she said with an unquestionable attitude, You're not allowed to talk about your father like that. The young man got up and left the stool. He squatted at the door and sulked. The woman turned her head and secretly wiped her tears with her sleeve. After clearing away the bowls and chopsticks, she carried a small stool to the door and said softly, I'll warm the food for you in the pot. When you want to eat, just let me know. The young man lowered his head and choked out, Mother, I don't want to get angry at you. I'm just complaining about my father. He let you down. The woman smiled and said, How did your father let your mother down? Your father, ever since he knew me, has never said a harsh word to me, nor has he lost his temper once. For so many years, the crops have been taken care of by him alone. He has never allowed me to work in the fields, not even once. Every time he went to the market in town, he didn't forget to bring back some hairpins, rouge, and other small things. Back then, I complained that he was wasting money. Every time your father said he understood. But every time, your father would still buy them. Your mother, I only complained about your father verbally, but I liked him in my heart. Which girl in the village doesn't envy your mother for marrying into a good family? The young man said angrily, It's my father's fortune to be able to marry you. He should love my mother so much. The woman smiled and stroked her son's head. When you find a wife in the future, you have to treat her as well. The young man was still resentful. Anyway, he's definitely not like my father. Once he left, there was no news of him for several years. He didn't even know how to send a letter home. The woman smiled gently and didn't say anything. The young man suddenly said, "Mother, Brother Wenhua said that I shouldn't mingle in the pugilistic world. He said that when he has saved enough money, he can buy that restaurant from the shopkeeper around this autumn. In the future, he wants me to help him do odd jobs, and I agree." The woman said happily, "That's a good thing. You know so many friends, but only your brother Wenhua truly cares for you. In the future, when you help him with things, put in more effort. Don't think too much about money. Your father said that we humans can't climb out of money once we fall into it. That's the life of a lifetime of hard work. It looks like we don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it's actually not comfortable." The young man smiled. "Ha, my father can say such things." The woman pretended to hit him. The young man suddenly asked, "My father's name is Wang Mingyin." The woman who was just pretending to give her son a chestnut, now really hit her son's forehead. She laughed angrily and said, "How can a son call his father's name directly?" The young man smiled and said, "Mother, let me tell you, there used to be a man called Wang Mingyin in the Jianghu. He was very powerful. His brother was Wang Mingyang, who guarded Xiangfan City for 10 years. He was the only high-ranking official that even the Prince of Northern Liang couldn't do anything about. Wang Mingyang himself was also very powerful. He was the 11th martial arts master in the world. The Wang family of the two brothers was even more terrifying. I've heard of a scholarly saying, generations of Zhaning. It probably means that many generations of the family were high-ranking officials and dignitaries. Mother, do you want to hear about the Jianghu deeds of the guy with the same name as our father?" The woman shook her head and smiled. "I don't want to hear about it." The young man looked at the sky and stood up. "Brother Wen said yesterday that he asked me to find him for a drink when I have time. It seems that he heard something happy. I'll go now." The woman hurriedly stood up. "Bring some cloth." The young man rolled his eyes. "Brother Wen doesn't care about this." The woman glared at him. "It's good that he doesn't care. Our Wang family has to put ourselves in his shoes." The young man made a face. "That's what my father said too, right?" The woman went to the inner room and brought back 2 pieces of cloth. She handed them to her son. After drinking, walk slowly on the way home. The young man took the cloth and left the house as fast as he could, saying that he knew. The woman saw that her son didn't close the door. She shook her head helplessly and went to close it. When she was about to bolt the door, she paused. In the end, she didn't completely close the door. She turned and walked into the house. "Mingyin, your son has grown up. He's like you." On the great snow plateau of Mount Hui, the Xianyuan family's reputation couldn't reach the top of Jianghu even in the hands of Xianyuan Great Plate. Now, not only had it suppressed the Taoist master's mansion of Longhu Mountain, it could even look down on the Donghua sword pool. In the whole world, perhaps only the Wu family's sword tomb could be on par with it. All of this was attributed to the woman in purple who was in charge of the Moonless Tower. Countless Jianghu heroes willingly prostrated themselves under her purple clothes. When she had a place in the martial arts review, the Great Snow Plateau, which had become the newest holy land in Jianghu, was even more crowded. There were so many mountaineers that it was impossible for people to go down the mountain. When her name didn't appear in the Rouge Review, countless young chivalrous men in purple who admired her felt injustice. They clamored that they would teach Nailan Yusi and Xie Guining a lesson. The former 4th prince, who was now the emperor, had come to visit but was refused at the door. In addition, the king of Beiliang had asked the Fish Dragon gang to escort the books in the Tide Listening Pavilion Martial Library to Mount Hui. These 2 things undoubtedly had great influence on the Jianghu people who liked to make groundless accusations. Many people speculated that the reason why the emperor didn't like Su Fengnian so much was not only because of the old grudge between the previous emperor and the vassal kings of Beiliang, but also because of jealousy. This kind of wild speculation, which was originally sneered at by the Liang officialdom, began to gain a firm foothold after the emperor personally sent people to the moonless tower of Mount Hui with the inscription, "Invincible in the world." The whole Jianghu had a better impression of the new emperor, who was famous for his various literary and administrative actions after ascending the throne. After all, the two previous emperors of Liang were both iron-fisted monarchs who liked to pass on the Jianghu. The current emperor didn't treat the Jianghu people kindly, but at the very least, he didn't have any deep hatred for them. This was worth celebrating even if it wasn't the new year. Xianyuan Qingfeng stood under an old cassia tree. After Mount Hui's chief guest, Huang Fangfua, left the mountain, and the purple-clothed woman, who was the Mount Hui mountain master and the Wulin alliance leader, was obsessed with martial arts, Huang Fangfua, who had reached the finger mystery realm, became more and more powerful. However, even though he was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people in Mount Hui, Huang Fangfua was more cautious than before. He didn't dare to cross the line. In the past, in order to increase her realm, she had absorbed the internal energy of countless Jianghu masters. Her cruel methods were even worse than those so-called Jianghu devils. The latter would at least pay attention to the fact that a rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its burrow. She had started from killing the retainers of Mount Hui from the very beginning. Only when no one was worthy of her attention did she target the masters outside the mountain. Now, after the battle with Wang Xianji, her martial arts attainment and realm had improved by leaps and bounds. Some of the secret manuals sent by the Tide Listening Pavilion made her even more powerful. Xianyuan Qingfeng asked calmly, "How many second-grade masters are there on the mountain?" Huang Fangfo replied respectfully, "There are 6 people willing to serve Mount Hui. There are 11 people who are only willing to add flowers to the brocade." Xianyuan Qingfeng sneered, "Flowers to the brocade." Huang Fangfo felt a chill all over his body. Xianyuan Qingfeng kept her hands behind her back. She raised her head and looked at the leaves of the cassia tree. Her tone turned gentle, "Flowers to the brocade, charcoal in the snow, frost in the snow, oil in the fire, cotton in the wind, and a knife in the heart." Then, she mocked herself, "What kind of woman do you think I am?" Of course, Huang Fangfo wasn't naive enough to think that she was talking to him. He left silently. She waited until Huang Fangfo was far away. "At that time, you used the luck of the Imperial Jade Seal to help me stabilize my realm. I didn't accompany you to Shenwu City to deal with Han Xingxian. But later, Wang Xianji went to find trouble with you. We don't owe each other anything anymore. Now, I have Zhao Huangchao and useless monk's martial arts experience. I don't need those boxes of secret manuals at all. Do you want to do a big deal with me again?" Xianyuan Qingfeng was silent for a moment. "Or do you think we're even?" Dunhuang City. In a hidden house that no one cared about, a plump woman bent down to protect a toddler who had just learned to walk. The toddler wobbled as he reached out to grab the bead curtain hanging at the door. As the child's mother, her eyes were filled with doting, love, guilt, and regret. She crouched down and hugged the child. The adult's cheek touched the child's cheek. She said softly, "Su Nianliang, my little sweet potato, when you grow up, you must find your father." Chapter 14-17. The 3 of them took a detour to Green Deer Cave Academy. The 3 of them stopped at the foot of the mountain and gave the horses to the academy's odd job workers to feed them. Then, they walked up the stairs. Although Su Fingnian was in a hurry, he climbed the mountain slowly. It was on this mountain path that he once had a thrilling battle of life and death with Gao Shulu. After that, he obtained the celestial physique. Miss Wang Xianji also wore that inappropriate mink hat to stop her. It was like throwing an egg against a rock. When Su Fingnian rested in a pavilion halfway up the mountain, he looked at the mountains and rivers of Yuzhou. For some reason, he remembered the scholar who said, "Ancestor, please die." Su Fengnian leaned against a bright red pavilion pillar that the academy had repainted at the beginning of the year. He muttered to himself, Xianyuan Jingqing, I gave books to Mount Hui last year. Perhaps your daughter was suspicious and thought that I wanted to do some business with her. In fact, I just wanted to have more Jianghu seeds. Xianyuan Qingfeng thought that I didn't know what Zhao Huangchao did before he died. I just didn't want to pursue the matter. If she wants to be the Wulian Alliance leader as a woman and be Mount Hui's Wang Xianji, then let her be. In another 100 years, the number of heavenly phenomenon cultivators will probably be rarer than the current Earth immortals. There won't be any scholars who can read books and reach the Confucian saint realm. Back then, you said, an ant trying to shake a tree is worthy of respect and overestimation. I didn't feel anything back then. Now that I think about my situation in Beiliang, I can't help but feel sad. Lu Yunzhang, whose bruises hadn't completely disappeared, whispered, Master, it's fine to go to Bishan County. After all, there's such a beautiful woman like Aunt Pei. It's not good to be left out. But here in Green Deer Cave Academy, I can hear the sound of those scholars even from halfway up the mountain. My head hurts. Master, what do you think you're doing here? I'll tell you in advance. If there's no second Aunt Pei and you're only here to listen to people recite books, I'll really get angry. When the time comes, I'll raise my sword and slash it down again and again, chopping those scholars into pieces. Hu Yulong said angrily, Lu Yunzhang, haven't hit me enough. Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death. Lu Yunzhang also stomped his feet and looked at Su Fengnian with a resentful expression. He said aggrievedly, Master, you're biased toward eldest senior brother. It's fine that you gave old Monster Wang's secret manual to him for safekeeping, but you even gave your grandfather's saber manual, which he painstakingly worked on for his entire life, to eldest senior brother. I was picked up by the roadside and given to my stepmother to raise, right? Su Fengnian bent 2 fingers and gently knocked on Lu Yunzhang's head. He smiled and said, It's not that I'm stingy or biased towards you Dilong. It's just that those 2 items are not to your liking. When I have some martial arts insights in the future, as long as I have the opportunity to compile them into a book, I will only give them to you and not you Dilong and Wang Xing. Su Fengnian said softly, Continue up the mountain. Lu Yunzhang, who was following behind Su Fengnian, glanced at Hu Yulong smugly. The latter rolled his eyes. Su Fengnian asked with a smile, Have you ever thought of a question? Why are Buddhist temples built at the foot of the mountain while large Taoist temples are at the top of the mountain? As for Confucian academies, they tend to be halfway up the mountain. Lu Yunzhang said without hesitation, Bald donkeys like incense money. They're afraid that pilgrims will be too tired from climbing the mountain. Those Taoists seek immortality and ascension. Naturally, they have to choose a place closest to the immortals. They recite sutras and flatter them every day so that the immortals can hear them. As for what the scholars think, it's probably because the foot and top of the mountain have been occupied, so they can only build houses halfway up the mountain. Master, isn't my explanation very reasonable? Su Fengnian didn't comment and continued asking, Dilong, what do you think? Yu Dilong was just a shepherd boy. He had never seen any Taoist temples or academies in his life. He had no understanding of Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism, so he was naturally confused. However, since his master had asked, the child could only bite the bullet and think about it. He finally understood what Lu Yunzhang meant by having a headache. Thankfully, his master was understanding. He quickly turned his head and said with a smile, If you can't figure it out for the time being, don't think about it. But when you grow up and encounter something that you can or can't think about it more. If you can or can't do it, there's no harm in doing it. In life, when there's no need to worry about self-preservation, you only want to have a clear mind and ignore the wishes of others. It's fine if you don't want to be a land immortal. Yu Dilong nodded vigorously and said, I'll remember. The three of them arrived at the entrance of the Green Deer Cave Academy. There was a rule that martial artists had to take off their armor and sabers. Of course, it was set by Su Fengnian himself. However, Yudilong was unwilling to take off the big saber, and Lu Yunzhang was also unwilling to part with the long saber he nicknamed Big-Footed Wife. The two of them could only wait in the open square outside the academy. Su Fengnian took off the Beiliang saber from his waist and placed it in a large bamboo basket placed on both sides of the entrance. There were already 6 or 7 luxurious long swords with beautiful sword tassels inside. Now, Beiliang didn't allow private individuals to carry sabers. Otherwise, they would be thrown into prison by the roaming cavalry. There was no mercy. Otherwise, Su Fengnian estimated that there would be 6 or 7 Beiliang sabers inlaid with pearls and jade in the basket. The Liang imperial court didn't forbid academies from all over the world. Shengyan Academy was the most famous, private school in the world. However, the Zhao clan didn't support it. The founders of the academies were mostly local famous scholars and scholars. Very few local officials were appointed as mountain elders or cave masters. Beiliang was an exception. Under the personal supervision of Su Fengnian, the current dozen or so academies in Beiliang, Yuliang, and Lingling were not only funded by Mount Qingliang and the local government, but officials were also not allowed to obstruct or suppress the academies. For example, the cave master of the Green Deer Cave Academy was the leader of the local imperial censors, Huang Chang. Although these academies were the pure land established by Su Fengnian, the northwest vassal king, those scholars didn't care about the milk is the mother. When the war in Yuzhou was urgent, especially when the two cities of Crouching Bao and Xiaoguang were conquered, the academy's curses and criticisms were the loudest. Then it more or less spread to the common people and people's hearts wavered. Not only did the meritorious generals like Yan Wenluan hate this, even the Yuzhou provincial governor Hu Kuei and the Liangzhou provincial governor Tian Peifang, who was born as a scholar, both expressed their concerns to Deputy Administrator Song Dongming. However, the insightful people, like Administrator Li Gongdan, knew that the direction of the academies depended on how the king of Beiliang would decide. Of course, most of the local officials in Beiliang felt that these embroidered pillows who dared to embarrass the king of Beiliang would not have a good ending. Especially when Yuan Dao and Wan Qi made contributions outside the gourd mouth and eased the war in Yuzhou, they all felt that it was time to kill the chicken to warn the monkey and kill the evil wind and rain. Then, Su Fengnian walked into the Green Deer Cave Academy, which was full of books. Because he had only met Huang Chang and the others at the gate of the academy, and there were many foreign scholars in the academy, no one in the Xanadu recognized him. They only thought that he was a Beiliang aristocratic family who came to the academy to study. Su Fengnian entered a library. The lectures in the academy were mainly about Confucian classics, history books, poetry and literature, and sometimes about current politics. Today's lecture was hosted by a great Confucian scholar. The library was spacious, and there were more than 100 futons on the ground for the scholars to sit on. However, there were still not enough futons, so Su Fengnian, who entered from the back door, could only sit casually at the back. The great Confucian scholar, who was only a juror in the imperial examinations, was explaining the art of making. It was a little suspicious that a 9th-level master was wantonly commenting on a grandmaster of martial arts. However, after Su Fengnian listened carefully for a moment, he still felt that he had benefited a lot, especially when it came to guessing questions. The scholars of Liangdi were going to the capital to take the imperial examinations in the spring. Perhaps there would be a few more people who could pass the imperial examinations. Ever since Su Xiao, Beiliang had turned a blind eye to the scholars flowing out of the capital. From Yan Jieshi to Yao Baifeng entering the capital to take up a post, Su Xiao did not purposely make things difficult for them. Su Fengnian was also happy to see Sun Yin succeed. The reason was simple. Li Shan had once made an analogy. When a baby bird grew up, it would feed its mother, let alone a human. At the time, the youth His Royal Highness was still puzzled. Li Shan smiled and said that perhaps only 1 or 2 of the 10 people would be grateful to Beiliang, but that was enough. If the 10 people were confined in Beiliang and cut off their path to fame and official career, then 8 or 9 of them would harbor hatred towards Beiliang. Chapter 14:18. Next, the great Confucian picked a few topics that were not so boring and allowed the young scholars to express their opinions. They talked about the emperor's establishment of the 6 pavilions, the order for 12 painting masters to paint the portraits of the meritorious officials of the spring and autumn period, and their views on the emperor allowing the portraits to be placed in the Temple of Meritorious Officials and the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Most importantly, the great Confucian smiled and asked the scholars to guess whether the old Prince Liang would be among the portraits. If so, who would be the painter? Would it be He Lu, who had the reputation of family of He, family of Lu, family of wealth? Or would it be little Yuqi, who was famous for his paintings of Buddha, ghosts and deities, especially the 1,000 Hands Eye exorcism wall? Or would it be Zhang Xixuan, who had recently presented his poems and paintings to the emperor himself? There was a lot of discussion in the library, and it was very lively. Su Fengnian was a little emotional. After Zhao Zhuan set a trap for the 10,000 Yu cavalry in Ji Bay, and then demonstrated his power in the northwest, at the Ministry of War, he quickly combined strength with gentleness. There was a rumor outside the palace that the emperor wanted to lose out on Su Xiao's posthumous title, and wanted to posthumously promote General Su Xiao. As for this loss, of course, it was caused by the then Grand Secretary, Zhang Julu, and his new emperor, Zhao Zhuan, and his new dynasty were trying their best to remedy it. If this was the work of the head of the Secretariat, Su Fengnian would not be surprised. But if it was Zhao Zhuan's idea, then it was very worrying. Su Fengnian was not worried about the narrow-minded emperor of Liang. On the contrary, the more Zhao Zhuan did not care about trifles, the more dangerous Beiliang's situation would be. Zhao Zhuan harbored great enmity toward Beiliang, or perhaps toward Su Fengnian. The matter of Ji Bay and the transport of water had already been made clear. The more Zhao Zhuan gave Su Xiao, the more he would demand from Su Fengnian. What he gave was fake, and what he wanted was real. But in the eyes of the Liang court, this kind of choice was very reasonable. Su Fengnian was lost in thought, and then he was suddenly disturbed by a quarrel. It turned out that the 7 or 8 foreign scholars and local scholars who were in opposing camps had suddenly begun to quarrel. They were arguing about when Beimang would take Xiaoguang City and how stable Huda City was. Neither side had any objections to the fall of Xiaoguang City under the assault of more than 200,000 Yuzhou soldiers. However, the local scholars of Beiliang felt that they could at least hold on for another 10 to 15 months. The foreign scholars, on the other hand, had learned from the example of Crouching Bao and Luanhe, believed that Xiaoguang City could be taken in the near future. As for Huda City, which was known as the most majestic town in the northwest, the quarrel was even more intense. The former felt that if they could hold on for a month, they would have succeeded, while the latter almost blindly believed that Huda City could become the second pillar of the Central Plains, Xiangfan City, the pillar of Beimang's cavalry. During this period of time, there was a clear confrontation. Both sides argued that Su Fengnian had personally appeared at the mouth of the gourd and crippled Beimang's supply line. They quarreled until their faces turned red. The foreign scholars believed that the son of a rich family should not sit under the awning. They said that Su Fengnian's childish act of risking his life was because he wanted to be a hero whose name would go down in history. It was a childish attitude that caused mischief. Not only could he not be praised, if he were the emperor, he would be impeached and punished. After all, the Beiliang scholars were a little clumsy with words. Many of their rebuttals were not able to express their ideas. The scholars who went to Liang were well-read and could always come up with a chain of sages' principles to mock and ridicule. In the end, the Beiliang scholars who lost the quarrel were indeed natives of Beiliang. They almost rolled up their sleeves and used their fists to reason with those bastards who just stood there and talked. In the end, a scholar from the Shangyin Palace glared at them and scolded them as barbarians who added fuel to the fire. This completely messed up the situation. For a moment, fists and saliva flew around Su Fengnian. It was very lively. The Beiliang scholars originally thought that they would not be at an advantage in the quarrel because they were tall and strong, so they would not be at a disadvantage. They did not expect that the two foreign scholars had practiced martial arts and were proficient in both the pen and the sword. Su Fengnian, who had been sitting on the ground all this time and had been implicated, raised his hand to block the sole of one of his shoes and gently pushed it away. Very quickly, he had to turn his head to avoid someone's spit and then support a scholar who had been beaten until he staggered backward. The Beiliang generals who had climbed the mountain to study and left their swords in bamboo baskets were angered when they heard a little about it. They practically jumped over the heads of many scholars and entered the battlefield, turning the disadvantageous situation around in an instant. The great scholar who had once been in charge of lecturing in the Shangyin Palace but was fond of military studies did not feel that it was a disgrace to the refined. Not only did he not harshly berate them, he even smiled and stroked his beard. He sat on the ground and commented on the martial arts of both sides. The foreign scholars who dared to come to Beiliang would not have the courage and insight if they did not have a bit of courage. Therefore, the fight became more and more intense. Very quickly, blood was spilled. Even so, no one retreated. First, the generals who had come because of the Beiliang's reputation entered the battlefield as reinforcements. Their actions quickly resonated with all the Beiliang scholars in the library. They all got up and ran wildly toward the battlefield behind the library. Soon after, there were also foreign scholars who gathered together as fellow countrymen from the various daos and provinces of Liang to help out. The great scholar was still not in a hurry. He watched as the number of scholars who were sitting decreased. Many scholars with small arms and thin legs also got up and rushed over. Even if they did not fight, they would still encourage others to join in the fight. Su Fengnian helped the locals a few times, but he had a sense of propriety. He only helped them block a few moves that were too heavy. He also secretly pulled back a few steps when one of the generals kicked him viciously in the groin. In the end, the battle behind the library came to an end. The gong sounded and the soldiers retreated. Both sides confronted each other aggressively and stared at each other, ready to start the next big battle at any time. Su Fengnian, of course, stood on the side of the local scholars. Beside him, there was a dandy from a general family in Yuzhou who had blood seeping out of the corner of his mouth. He grimaced in pain and turned his head to Su Fengnian who had blocked a fist for him. He said with a smile, "Brother, thanks for just now. When we go down the mountain, I'll treat you to a drink with girls. I've long disliked this bunch of bastards. Oh right, I'm Yang Huizhi from Shirlu County. When you get to the county, say my name and I'll guarantee that you'll be safe. Of course, don't do anything like killing and robbing. Even I don't dare to do such things." Cave Master Huang Shang heard the news and rushed over. He ran into the library and shouted angrily, "The academy is a place for scholars to cultivate and live in peace. What are you doing? If you have the strength to fight, go join the army at the Beiliang border." Huang Shang didn't look at the two groups of people who were clearly divided. He sighed softly to the calm Confucian lecturer and said, "Xueji, you don't even control them a little." The Confucian scholar called Xueji smiled and casually pointed at a calligraphy painting hanging on the wall behind him. "We scholars are not afraid of being unreasonable, but we are afraid of not being reasonable. It's better to be calm and to fight. It's better than holding it in and waiting to be dealt with in the future. Revenge is never too late for a gentleman." Many years later, when those with high positions in the officialdom teach those with low positions bully those who aren't officials, and those who aren't officials can only bully the common people, wouldn't that be too scary? It's better for everyone to finish fighting today and vent their anger. Then, we can sit down and continue talking. Cave Master, I'm waiting for them to calm down after they can't fight anymore. Then, I'll enlighten them a little. These half-baked people in the library usually sway a lot. If they don't suffer, they won't remember anything. Huang Shang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said helplessly, "Old Shui, you." Huang Shang suddenly saw a figure out of the corner of his eye. His heart immediately shook. Right now, the officialdom of Beiliang was waiting to see a good show from the various academies. Huang Shang absolutely supported the scholars' discussion of politics. However, he was worried that the academies, on the mountain, were interfering with the military affairs at the border and causing the people, below the mountain, to be unsettled. Although the king of Beiliang had promised him and the officialdom not to interfere with the academy's affairs, he had also said that the academy would not be punished for their words. He had even protected the scholars from the disaster of war and the humiliation of martial artists. However, Huang Shang still didn't quite believe that the young and impetuous king of Beiliang would really be a hands-off shopkeeper. Moreover, it was the academy that had caused trouble first. Therefore, when the Green Deer Cave Master saw Su Fengnian appear on the battlefield, he immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Was Su Fengnian going to make things difficult for him? The seeds of learning in Beiliang hadn't even taken root yet, and he was going to give up halfway. Huang Shang was indeed a stubborn person. The colder his heart, the more unwilling he was to back down. He took a few steps forward and asked Su Fengnian directly, "Has the king of Beiliang come here to denounce us? Is he going to close the academy? Is he going to forbid the scholars of Beiliang from studying?" Su Fengnian shook his head and looked at the words. He said calmly, "I originally just wanted to take a look and then leave. However, I am much more at ease now. The words on the wall are, 'Important matters of 1,000 years require the most consideration.'" Su Fengnian looked around and said with a smile, "I hope that all of you scholars will think about it carefully. Only after you have thought about it will you speak louder. You and I will encourage each other." Su Fengnian faced the great scholar and bowed slightly with his hands clasped in front of him. This principle was taught by teacher. Su Fengnian has learned from your teachings. Xueji should have hurriedly stood up to return the greeting, but for some reason, at that moment, this old Confucian scholar who had been depressed in Shangyin Academy forcibly placed his buttocks back onto the prayer mat, straightened his back, and silently accepted the greeting. Long after the young king of Beiliang and cave master Huang Shang left the library, Xueji still didn't move. The old man finally lowered his head and reached out to touch the ground outside the praying mat. Who said that the soil of Beiliang can only produce horses and armor, but not scholars? Xueji faced the group of young scholars who still hadn't recovered from their shock. He raised his hand and pressed down, his expression full of high spirits. "All of you, sit down. I, Xueji, will finally talk about how to think. This is the kind of thinking that scholars of my generation should have." Chapter 14:19. The mountain head of Green Deer Cave Academy, Huang Chang, saw Su Fengnian off alone. On the way down the mountain, the two of them did not speak much. Huang Chang was exhausted because his momentum had been exhausted by the first spurt of energy. Since the young king of Qingliang did not come to the foothills of Green Deer Cave Academy to settle accounts with his students, then Huang Chang did not have a target to shoot at. After all, he could not give Su Fengnian an inch and ask for a foot by asking for more positions in the local government offices. Mount Qingliang was already very generous in allowing scholars to hold important positions in various provinces, counties and counties. Even if Huang Chang's face was even thicker, he could not open his mouth. The more silent Su Fengnian was, the more nervous Huang Chang became. When they were near the foot of the mountain, the old man sighed and smiled bitterly. "Your Highness, your knife is always on this old man's neck, but you don't cut it off or take it away. This old man feels uncomfortable. How about you give me a quick answer? If you really can't, then I'll say it from the bottom of my heart. Let someone else be the headmaster of the Green Deer Cave. The academy is like a field of crops. It's hard to get some good seedlings. If your highness thinks I'm not taking care of it well, then let someone else be obedient. Don't take out your anger on those seedlings. Su Fengnian didn't stop. He said slowly, Teacher, you worry too much. There's nothing wrong with the scholars of the academy discussing the military and politics of Beiliang. There's nothing wrong with the more you debate, the more confused you become. Huang Chang nodded as if relieved of a heavy burden. Su Fengnian continued, but as headmasters and teachers, you have to take advantage of the situation and not look on coldly. I'm not asking you to speak good words for the Beiliang frontier army, because that's meaningless. I hope that the scholars who have taken root in Beiliang understand one thing. The reason they can point out the country is because there are people dying on the front lines every day. It's those dead people and the Beiliang frontier army who are about to die in battle that make Beiliang's territory not have a wisp of smoke. No matter whether they won or lost on the battlefield, they were not wrong at all. Of course, it's not a problem to scold me, Mount Qingliang, or the Beiliang Protectorate for not properly dispatching troops or for making a mistake in their plans. However, if you have the intention of watching the fire burn across the river and rejoicing in other people's misfortune, Beiliang has always politely declined such a scholar. You can go back to wherever you came from. Mount Qingliang can still afford this little bit of traveling expenses. Huang Shang's expression became serious again. Su Fengnian glanced at the old man and smiled indifferently. You always feel that there's something wrong with other people. You always think that if I don't help the people, who can I do it? Reading books is to cultivate righteousness, not to cultivate arrogance and viciousness. I myself am a person who has been through this. All day long, I complain about the heavens and accuse others. When I look around, all I see is injustice. The depression in my heart is even more difficult to suppress. Perhaps you've never experienced such a thing in your life, which is why I made a special trip to Green Deer Cave Academy to say a few words. Huang Shang was half believing and half doubtful. You really only said a few words? Su Fengnian smiled. With regards to the scholars of the academy discussing military affairs at the border, it's better to let things flow. I will have the government gift the various academies a few sets of the essentials of military supplies written by Qin Jibao. Why don't you let a great scholar familiar with military affairs take the lead in explaining it? First, understand the history of cold knives, guns, crossbows, and horse policy in Beiliang, and understand how we manage the army in Beiliang. Only then can you talk about the important matters at the border. Huang Shang sighed emotionally. What a good, it's better to let things flow than to let things flow. Huang Shang hesitated for a moment before adding, Your Highness has handled this matter beautifully. Huang Shang was famous for being stingy with words of praise. This kind of bootlicking was truly difficult to speak of. It could be seen that Su Fengnian's visit to the academy had indeed made the old man very satisfied. Su Fengnian laughed self-deprecatingly. Technical work, as a reward. Huang Shang, who no longer held any grudges in his heart, spoke more freely. I only know how to study. I dare say that in less than 5 years, Liang will have a whole new level of respect for Beiliang's literature and classics. Before Su Fengnian mounted his horse and left, he said to Huang Shang, on the eve of the Qingming festival, please bring the scholars of the academy to the Steel Forest on Mount Qingliang. There will be a libation ceremony there. Huang Shang was stunned for a moment before replying in a low voice, as it should be. Leaving Green Deer Cave Academy, the three of them galloped on. Lu Yunchang asked, Master, are we going to the Beiliang Protectorate or to Huda City, which is currently at war? Su Fengnian said unhappily, Go back to the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. Don't worry about anything else. Yudilong shouted, Master, I want to go to Huda City to kill the barbarians. Su Fengnian was silent for a moment before suddenly saying, Dilong, go to Liuzhou with Yunchang. Go to Qingsang City and secretly protect Yang Guangdou and Qin Shiliang. If a war really breaks out, you can do as you see fit. I allow you to make your own decisions. At a fork in the road, Lu Yunchang was pleasantly surprised. He rubbed his hands and said, Master, then we'll have to split up now. Su Fingnian nodded and did not forget to remind him, Yunchang, when you're on the battlefield, keep an eye on your senior brother. Don't let him kill until he's blinded by madness. In short, none of you should die in Liuzhou. Your real battlefield is the Jianghu in the future. Udilong grinned and said, Master, after I've paid off the big guy's debt, I'll be rewarded. Master, don't forget to reward me. I still have to send it to Auntie Pei. She needs a lot of money to build the courtyard house. We can't let Auntie Pei borrow money from outsiders, right? Su Fingnian laughed and scolded, You're already siding with outsiders at such a young age. All right. If that day really comes, the Beiliang Frontier Army won't forget to give you a copper coin. Lu Yunchang laughed and said, A married daughter is like spilled water. Udilong raised his fist and said anxiously, Who are you calling a girl? Are you itching for a beating? Do you want me to help you beat it? Su Fingnian stopped his horse at the fork in the road. He smiled as he looked at the backs of the two horses chasing each other. Suddenly, he whipped his horse and moved forward. In the past, the young man in brocade robes angrily whipped Liangzhou city. The awakening of hibernation had passed and the spring equinox was approaching. Su Fingnian rode alone along the heavily guarded road to Huaiyang Pass in the north of Liangzhou. At this time, not only was the war in Beiliang getting heavier and the world in chaos, but after Ko Jianghuai resigned and retired to the countryside, the young commander of the West Chu Line, Xie Shibian, assumed the position of commander of the Eastern Line. He fought 3 battles in a row in 10 days. Xie Shibian, who had previously defeated Yan Jinchuan's Iron Cavalry and Yang Xinqing's Ji Zhou's elite infantry, was once again met with the expectations of the West Chu imperial court. He was defeated in succession and was forced to retreat. The West Chu navy led by Chao Chongqing finally stopped holding back and began to push downstream. In order to reduce the pressure on Xie Shibian on land, they began to confront the navy of Guangling Prince Zhao Yi. On the other hand, the Prince of Yanqi, Zhao Bing, led 100,000 elite soldiers and marched northward. At the same time, the commander of the southern expedition, General Lu Xingxiang, led tens of thousands of soldiers from Nanjing's Ji camp to the south, coordinating with the southern army. The imperial court situation was good. After Yuan Tingshan made a good start in Ji Bay, Tang Taishuang, who was Gu Jintang's trusted general along with Kai Nan, also took the initiative to attack on the eastern line and beheaded 6,000 Beimang. For this reason, the Emperor of Liang ordered Tang Taishuang to go to the capital to replace Lu Xingxiang as the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. This general, who had the reputation of fierce tiger general, came to the capital just after the other assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Su Gong, stepped into the Tuliao. Therefore, after Wu Congxian and Fan Changho, the new chess saint of Liang, 10th Dan, were said to have entered the capital one after another, there was also the saying of Dragon General Su Gong and Fierce Tiger General, Dragon General Su Gong and Fierce Tiger General. Chapter 1420. Liang Imperial Court was flourishing with each passing day, and the people were reassured, which only served to accentuate the unrest in the northwest. It was rumored that after Beiliang Road lost Huagong and Luanhe, the last barrier outside the pass, Xiaoguang City, was also on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, Huda City, the northernmost city outside Liangzhou Pass, was also in imminent danger. What made the people of Liang even more disappointed and angry was a rumor that Yozhou's Huda City, which was said to be able to hold off more than 100,000 Beimang cavalry, was said to be under the command of Yang Yuanzhan. Up until now, the 300,000 troops of Beimang had actually increased instead of decreasing. The people of Liang, especially the people of the capital, naturally began to speculate whether or not the Beiliang barbarians had thrown in their lot with the Beimang barbarians. Otherwise, how could there be more and more people fighting in this world? Huda City, which was north of Huayang Pass and south of Longyan Flat, had always been said to be the best. In Su Zhao's hands, he had placed as many as 30,000 troops in this majestic town. There were nearly 10,000 cavalry and more than 20,000 infantrymen. All of them were old soldiers who were good at fighting. In addition, there were Huayang Pass and Liuya and Fuling as support. Behind this line of defense, there were Jinyuan, Qinghe, and Zhongzhong passes, as well as Xiancan and Shenwu cities as the two flanks of defense. Behind them were the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry, Great Ancestor Gu's infantry, and He Zhonghu's cavalry. Unlike Yozhou's Huda City, which was passively taking a beating, to the north of Liangzhou, other than Huda City, Liuya, Fuling, and Huayang Pass, where the protectorate was located, all had the strength to mobilize cavalry. It was precisely because of this flexible and powerful fighting force roaming the rear that Huda City's defense was filled with the bravery of everyone facing death calmly. When Su Fengnian walked into the protectorate's conference hall under the escort of a group of white horses, Chu Lushan was in the middle of discussing the situation with Su Weisheng and the cavalry's deputy commander, He Zhonghu, and the others. Seeing Su Fengnian's arrival, they didn't exchange any pleasantries. Su Fengnian took the opportunity to join in without any delay. Of course, Chu Lushan couldn't completely ignore Su Fengnian, the king of Beiliang. Therefore, he gave a brief summary. Cripple Lu of Huda City is arrogant. He said that he could defend Huda City alone for a year and a half without any problem. He asked us, Liuya, Fuling, and Huayang Pass, to launch an attack based on the premise that Huda City could not be lost. At the critical moment, the 10,000 elite cavalries in Huda City could even go out to fight at any time. Right now, we are calculating how Fatty Dong's 100,000 Dong family's private soldiers will be used, and when they will be used. Up until now, the northern Mang troops attacking the city are still the border soldiers from Gusai Prefecture. We've given them nearly 1,000 catapults in batches of 300, and they've been attacking the city day and night. It just looks very lively. Cripple Lu said that he wasn't used to it at first, but now, the Tiger Head city's defenders don't care about those disgusting catapults at night at all. They eat and sleep as usual, and there are no problems with their morale. At this point, Chu Lushan couldn't help but chuckle softly. All the armies are like crying children who want milk. They can't wait for a few dozen people to die before they talk about the situation as if it was a pile of eggs. Only our Beiliang frontier army is an exception. We are afraid that our parents will be worried. Even if we are beaten until we are covered in blood, we will grit our teeth and bear it. Chu Lushan continued, Luya and Fu Ling's two cavalry armies have already taken the initiative to attack twice. The results of the battle weren't great, but they forced Northern Mang to not let loose and besiege the city. Otherwise, if those 1,000 stone catapults were to open up on all fronts, not to mention attacking Tiger Head City, even attacking Tai and City would be quite imposing. During this period, Beimang sent out a light cavalry of 30,000 men in an attempt to intercept Liuya's cavalry and give us an opportunity to attack Huayang Pass. They didn't succeed in besieging the city and attacking the reinforcements. Instead, we easily slaughtered 6,000 of them. If it wasn't for Dongjue sending people to help us, we could have killed another 10,000 men. Our cavalry pushed northward to Huda City, and each of us threw out a barbarian's head. Your Highness, you didn't see the faces of those barbarians on the front lines. It was as if they hadn't been able to shit for months. Su Fengnian smiled knowingly and asked, how many casualties did Yang Yuanzhan suffer in Yuzhou? The veteran general He Zhong suddenly laughed heartily and said, there are already more than 50,000 casualties. In addition to the successful interception by Your Highness and Yulwandao with the Yochi, they may have added more than 100,000 men from Jinhe and Donghe, but they were actually just putting on a show. Those two prefectures should have been given to the two Liaodong lines. In the end, they used them so early. Beimang has a lot of controversy. Everyone is cursing the king of South Courtyard for robbing Peter to pay Paul. Some people have already suggested handing over the military power to Tuoba Bodhisattva. If it wasn't for the order of peace, Dong Zhuo might have already packed up his things and left. Su Fengnian looked at the sand table and nodded. He said softly, "We don't need to rush to a decisive victory. We just need to wear down Beimang's patience bit by bit. The battlefield has always been an extension of the court. We should aim for this battle at the end of the second year of Xiangfu. If we succeed in fighting until Dong Zhuo loses the king of South Courtyard, it will be our Beiliang's victory. The following 3 years of Xiangfu will be much easier." Su Weisheng nodded quietly, agreeing with Su Fengnian's words. It was obvious that no fault is a merit and was extremely conservative. Chu Lushan glanced at Huda's city on the sand table. "Then we must first ensure that Huda's city is not lost. We must not let Dong Zhuo have a chance to breathe." Su Fengnian said calmly, "Therefore, even if Lu Jinu and Huda's city can't defend it, we must defend it. Send a message to him." In the past, Huda's city was used as the Great Wu Castle in Yuzhou. Now, it's different. He can die, but Huda's city cannot be lost. Therefore, whenever Huda's city is about to fall, no matter what method we use, we must immediately let the Protectorate know. Then, even if we have to use Jinyuan, Qinghe Heavy Tomb, and Xuanqin Shenwu, we must reduce the pressure on them. Even the 10,000 Great Snow Dragon Cavalry and the 8,000 Heavy Cavalry can be used at the critical moment. He Zhonghu and a few famous old generals looked at each other, wanting to say something but hesitating. In Beiliang's plan, after a certain amount of Beimang's military strength was depleted, all the Great Wu Castle and the 3 cities of Yuzhou could be lost. They could also lose North Pass Town in Liangzhou. There was no need to defend to the end at all costs. Was it worth it for Dong Zhuo? Great Ancestor Gu closed his eyes and began to silently consider the battle situation and weigh the pros and cons. He Zhonghu unconsciously looked at Beiliang Protector General Chu Lushan. The great king of Beimang's South Courtyard had once been defeated by him. Logically speaking, Chu Lushan should be the one to refute this suggestion. However, in He Zhonghu's eyes, Chu Lushan did not speak. Instead, he interlaced his fingers on his abdomen and quickly scanned the sand table. At this moment, when even Chu Lushan did not speak, probably only Su Weisheng dared to speak. She frowned and said, "If the definition of Huda's city is changed, the entire defensive line of Liangzhou will change. This will have a huge impact on Lingzhou behind us." Su Fengnian replied, "Even if Su Beiji empties the entire Lingzhou and the area around Lingzhou, Liangzhou's provisions will not be affected." Great Ancestor Gu muttered to himself, "Fighting outside the country. Although this is Great Ancestor Gu's greatest dream, is it really suitable for Northern Liang, who has been sparing no effort to expand their territory?" This was definitely the first time Su Fengnian had displayed such an unyielding stance on the matters of the border. The atmosphere in the Protector General's house was particularly solemn. Su Fengnian suddenly asked, "Commander Yuan asked for the armor I wore at the time. He said it was the Protector General's idea." Su Weisheng's expression was strange. Chu Lushan chuckled and said, "I originally wanted to display it in this hall to look imposing. Later on, I thought about it and had someone send it to Huda City. Cripple Lu then gave it to someone else." Su Fengnian was confused. Chu Lushan withdrew his smile and said, "He gave it to our first Beiliang general to die in battle." Su Fengnian lowered his head to look at the sand table. "I know, it's Ma Ji from Huda City. At the time, in the courtyard inside the city, he sat at the very back. Because he scolded me, he didn't dare show his face." Chapter 14:21. In the hall, except for Su Fengnian and Su Weisheng, the governor of Beiliang Chu Lushan, the cavalry commander Yuan Zuozong, the deputy commander Zhou Kong, and the infantry deputy commander Chu Lushan were the 4 people with the highest positions and the greatest authority. As for Su Fengnian's proposal to defend Huda's city to the death, neither Chu Lushan nor Yuan Zuozong expressed their opinions for the time being. It was Zhou Kong who argued with Great Ancestor Gu first. During the Spring and Autumn War, Great Ancestor Gu was famous for proposing the theory of the world situation and proposing that Southern Tang must fight outside the country as the policy of protecting the country. However, it was Great Ancestor Gu, who seemed to have a strong sense of attack, who disagreed and did not agree with the Beiliang frontier army to help Lu Jina defend Huda's city to the death. On the contrary, it was Zhou Kong, who came from the Partridge headquarters camp, who agreed with Su Fengnian's point of view. Great Ancestor Gu did not care that Su Fengnian was on the spot and said mercilessly, "This kind of hasty change of strategy is more harmful to the Beiliang frontier army than the change of generals. How can the national affairs be trifled with?" Zhou Kong also argued, "Water is impermanent, and soldiers have no solid formation. What's wrong with waiting for an opportunity to act?" In addition to the rhetorical question, Zhou Kong said something meaningful. "When we made the military strategy of Beiliang in Yuliangliang province, the general and Li Shan were still there. At that time, the original intention was that Beimang would go south to the central plains through Beiliang and Jizhou. The Beimang barbarians only regarded Beiliang as an impregnable city. Even if they could not go around the city directly, they would only place 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers here to impede our Beiliang frontier army, instead of attacking the 3 provinces of Yuliangliu province today. Strategies and rules are dead, but our Beiliang soldiers are alive. The more than 100,000 border cavalry in Liangzhou are not to be trifled with." Zhou Kong kept saying our Beiliang, and mentioned Beiliang's early military and border cavalry. The old general's meaning was obvious. Great Ancestor Gu was an outsider who came late, but he was only the second in command of the infantry. Beiliang respected the cavalry, even more so in Liangzhou, so Great Ancestor Gu should be sensible at this time and place. In fact, the army was similar to the imperial court. Great Ancestor army was not only ranked, but also paid attention to family background. In Beiliang, those captains and generals who joined the cavalry camp from the infantry had to take a long time to get along with each other. The Northern Liang border army naturally had no objections to Great Ancestor Gu, who had been promoted by Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian frowned, but didn't say anything. Great Ancestor Gu didn't turn hostile on the spot, but his expression didn't look good either. He said coldly, "I'm just stating facts. No one denies that our border cavalry in Beiliang isn't strong enough. We only have strong combat power, but it doesn't mean that our leaders and soldiers can be squandered. War on the battlefield is like a game of chess. A national player who only knows how to play the game of chess, even if he can conquer an orphan or even slay a dragon, will lose more than gain in the overall situation. I don't want Beiliang's army to be a chess player who has the strength of a 10th Dan national player but only the vision of a 6th Dan chess player. Beiliang now controls 4 provinces, and there are hundreds of cities, military towns, strategic passes, and impregnable passes in these 4 provinces. Don't you need to weigh the pros and cons of using Huda's city as a chess piece to decide the survival of more than 100 chess pieces?" Zhou Kong clicked his tongue and said, "Why do I feel like it's Qin Jibao talking?" Great Ancestor Gu finally said angrily, "You bastard. Today, in front of General Zhou and the King of Beiliang, I'll tell you that the Beiliang army shouldn't deny Qin Jibao. Even the King of Beiliang has clearly proposed that the essentials of military preparation shouldn't be banned in the border army. Why can't you have a copy of it in your Liangzhou cavalry army? Zhou Kong, do you want to learn from Zhong Hongwu and be an impenetrable leader of the border army? You've disliked me for a long time, and I've disliked you for a long time, too." Usually, the commander of the cavalry army, Yuan Zuozong, would be a peacemaker. He would even help Great Ancestor Gu, an outsider, to reunite the family. He was like a mother-in-law. When his son quarreled with his daughter-in-law, he would really help his son by helping his daughter-in-law. But today, since Su Fengnian was here, Yuan Zuozong practiced the silent meditation and relaxed his mind. Chu Lushan was full of mischievous tricks, and he beamed as he watched the two vice-marshals blush with interest. Su Fingnian said calmly, "Those who are qualified to discuss here are all level 3 and level 2 officials. It's time to talk openly. But in the case of Huda City, we can find loopholes and fill in the gaps. But the decision to guard it for a year will not change." This sentence was said to Great Ancestor Gu. Then Su Fingnian said to Zhou Kong, "Don't ban Chen Jibao's military supplies. General Zhou, after you go back, take the lead to copy a volume. Including the commandant, all the lieutenants and generals can't be exempted. After you copy it, send it to the Protectorate of Beiliang. I'll review it myself. Whoever asks someone to write it for him or refuses to copy it, I'll go to your army and have a talk with him. If we can't reach an agreement, I'll send him to Yuzhou as an infantryman." Zhou Kong had a bitter expression as he carefully haggled, "Your Highness, that book has over 100,000 words, and a single volume has close to 10,000 words. Right now, the war is in full swing, so why don't we wait until we have time?" Su Fingnian said with a fake smile, "Then let's have a talk first. Do you want to drink some wine and ask my second sister to cook some dishes to go with the wine? After we eat and drink enough, General Zhou can go to Yuzhou." Zhou Kong hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, No, I'll stay up late to copy the book. Those lieutenants and commandants under my command will finish copying it within 10 days. After the two deputy commanders of infantry and cavalry left the Protectorate of Beiliang and went to their respective cities, Yuan Zuozong said with a smile, "It turns out that each of them will be beaten 50 times. Su Fingnian said worriedly, "Zhou Kong was beaten 50 times, but Great Ancestor Gu may feel that he was beaten 500 times. Yuan Zuozong asked, "Do we need to stop him and have a private talk with him?" General Gu is not that kind of stubborn person. As long as it makes sense, he will listen to it. Su Fingnian was a little helpless, but the problem is that I don't have the confidence to make sense. At that time, it will add fuel to the fire and make Great Ancestor Gu more insistent. It's better to be like now. I'm deliberately mystifying him. Great Ancestor Gu doesn't know whether I'm selling elixirs or dogskin plasters. He can only pinch his nose and do as I say." Su Fingnian saw that there were only his second sister, second brother Yuan and Chu Lushan in the hall. He said with a wry smile, "Now we are family. Finally, I don't have to pretend to be a master." In addition to laughing at the two old generals, Chu Lushan's eyes were more on the sand table. In fact, the Protector General of Beiliang had always been famous for his political and military achievements. He had always been looked down upon and underestimated by the entire Central Plains imperial court. Especially after the older generation of the Central Plains passed away one after another, Chu Lushan was only occasionally mentioned by people because he led thousands of cavalry to Shu province. Compared with Yan Wenluan and Chen Jibao, he was much inferior. He was even inferior to Yuan Zuozong, who showed his brilliance in the Battle of the Princess Tomb. At that time, people were very shocked that Chu Lushan, who was only a level 4 official, was appointed as the Protector General of Beiliang. However, the Beiliang army and its archenemy, Beimang, were not surprised. From this, it could be seen that the Liang imperial court generally did not care about Beiliang. What the eye did not see, the heart did not feel troubled. Chu Lushan had a saying that was widely spread among the upper echelons of the Beiliang frontier army. From the first time this fatty saw the sand table, he was intoxicated. In his early years, whether there was a war or not, he liked to stare at the sand tables of various countries in a daze. No one knew what was so interesting about these things. It was only when Wuxia asked him once that Chu Lushan told the truth. He said, "It is the same principle as reading a book. After reading a book 100 times, its meaning will be revealed." Later on, when the Su and Zhao separated from each other, Chu Lushan's home in Beiliang had no less than 100 sand tables of various sizes. It was rumored that the largest one took up the entire building. There was no place to stand on the first floor. If one wanted to see the sand table, one had to go straight up the stairs to the second floor to look down. Chu Lushan looked at the sand table at the northernmost city of Liangzhou, Huda City, and then at the southernmost city of Yuzhou, Xiaoguang City. He softly said, "It's not that Huda City can't be defended for a year. I've thought of a reason that might be able to convince Great Ancestor Gu."